what we practice, we get good at. So for many people, the first thing they do in the morning is that they practice stress. They get up, whether it's the news or emails or social media, in what I consider to be a very important time of the day, they allow the environment to start conditioning their mind, and then that conditions their body. Certainly that's the way I see it. And in a view of what we've been talking about so far, of course, we've mentioned addictions, which are rife these days. How important to you is the first part of the day when someone has woken up? Is that a critical part of the day where people have to be very intentional, or can they do some of the work that you promote later on? Or do you think first thing in the morning is a very important part of the day?
I want to be really careful about this. I think there's 2 times the door to the subconscious mind opens up. When we wake up in the morning and we go to bed at night, and it's simple brain chemistry and simple physiology. We have a circadian rhythm. As soon as there's light, our body has been pretty much programmed that we begin to release serotonin and different chemicals that kind of wake us up. So our brain waves go from delta to theta to alpha to beta. And you kind of slide up this way, and then you're back to conscious awareness and local in space and time. When you go to bed at night, you go from beta to alpha to theta to delta, and you slide down. Now, if you're stressed, you can't stop thinking. You stay in beta, and your thinking actually is arousing the body because you're thinking about your problems. You can't slide down, right? So those 2 points in the day, when we wake up in the morning and go to bed at night, when alpha, or our analytical facilities are suppressed, we're in theta, we're in a hypnotic state. Mm-hmm. And the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open. What separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. So as you suppress analytical facilities, you can program anybody to do anything. So then what really happens for most people before they even reach for their cell phone, and by the way, the statistics are 86% of the people in the Western world, first thing they do is they reach for the cell phone and they connect to everything that's known.
And why is that a problem?
Well, I would never tell people how to think, but I would give them information to cause them to think. So the device is reminding them of things that are known. And every person, every object, everything, every place is mapped neurologically in our brain because we've experienced it. And then we have an emotion associated with our coworker, with our boss, with our ex, with our whoever. And so the moment we start responding, now we start feeling the same way. So now the environment is actually controlling the person's feelings and thoughts.
Yeah.
And anything that controls the way we feel and the way we think, we're victims to. So something's programming us to think and feel a certain way. There's nothing wrong with that. You should check your text and do whatever you need to do. But the first thing in the morning, if the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is open, why don't we program a new behavior? Why don't we rehearse a different way of being with our children, with our spouse, in our Zoom meetings, when we're alone, when we're in traffic? Is there a better way to evolve our experience? So if you're truly in the game of evolution, you're truly in the game, like one lifetime, one day. What am I working on today? Can I respond a different way to this person? Can I think this way instead of that way? Let me be conscious of my unconscious thoughts. Let me not be in a habit. Let me stay away from certain emotions. Let me practice feeling these emotions and see if I can maintain it. Now you're in the game. You're out of the bleachers and you're on the playing field. So it actually happens even before the cell phone. Because what most people do is they wake up and the first thing they do is the brain is a record of the past. They think of their problems. And those problems are just memories that are etched in the brain that are connected to certain people and objects at certain times and places. Yeah. The moment they think of their problems, they're thinking in the past. Then when they think about their problems and they feel unhappy, now their body's in the past. And if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, wow. And then the emotion that's associated is now the body's in the past because thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body. And how we think and how we feel creates our state of being. Now here's the problem. If you can't think greater than how you feel, and you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, and you understand that feelings and emotions are a record of the past, then you're thinking in the past, and your life will stay the same.
Yeah. So I've always been a fan of morning routines, personally. For me, I've discovered when I have some intentional time to myself in the morning, and when I don't, I'm a different person. I show up differently. My productivity, the way I am with my wife or my kids is completely different. So I've learned, and I'm now 44 at this age, I know mornings are very important for me. And sure, could I do the same thing at lunchtime or later on? Well, technically I could, but I never find time, number one. Number two, I don't think it's as powerful later because I feel first thing in the morning, I'm priming myself to be a certain way for that day. And actually, since our first conversation, Dr. Joe, I went on your website and I downloaded some of your meditations. And I've been doing one most mornings. It's a 23-minute meditation. And I've got to say, my favorite bit in the meditation is about 17 or 18 minutes in, where you say something to the effect of, and I don't want to misspeak for your words, but it's something about, now's the time to remind yourself of the feelings you don't want to feel. Remind yourself of how you do want to show up. I love that bit because each time, for me, it's like, yeah, okay, I don't want to be like this today. And if and when this happens, this is how I want to show up. This is how I want to be. So first of all, I want to say thank you because it's this idea that you spoke about last time, mental rehearsal. You know, we have no problem thinking about athletes rehearsing how they're going to perform. We have no problem thinking that, of course, an actor, if they want to play a part a certain way, they're going to rehearse. They're going to keep rehearsing until they're able to do it. Yet, most of us don't really apply that in our own life. We don't think, yeah, I need to be rehearsing for the person I want to be in my own life.
Yeah. The game of life.
The game of life, the most important game.
The most important game. Well, 95% of who we are is a set of memorized behaviors, automatic emotional responses, unconscious habits, hardwired attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions that are running pretty much like a computer program. They're automatic, right? So you can think positively all you want. You can say, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm free, I'm worthy, I'm worthy. And your body's saying, no, you're not, you're miserable, right? So it makes sense that there's got to be an unlearning process. And we got to stay conscious of our unconscious thoughts that slip by our awareness unnoticed. We got to watch how we speak. We got to observe how we act. We got to pay attention to the way we're feeling, and we have to become so conscious of those unconscious states of mind and body that we don't go unconscious in our waking day. Because how you think, how you act, and how you feel is your personality, and your personality creates your personal reality. So if you're thinking the same way, you're acting the same way, and you're feeling the same way, nothing's going to change in your life, right? So then the unlearning process is as valuable as the relearning process. The breaking the habit of the old self has to happen before you reinvent a new self. You got to prune synaptic connections before you sprout new connections. You got to unfire and unwire before you refire and rewire. You got to deprogram and then reprogram.
How do you unlearn? Because I guess if we think about addiction, for many of us, this is just living in the past. We're just repeating behaviors that we've done in the past that made us change our state, that gave us that dopamine boost. I get you can meditate, you can feel that elevated emotion with a very, very high degree of emotional intensity. But how do you go about becoming conscious and unlearning those previous patterns?
It's trial and error.
Yeah.
You got to go out. You got to go out into life and try it out. Okay, I've changed my internal state. You could have a great meditation. You can connect. Your heart could open. This happened to me. You could open your heart. You'd be amazing. You feel like the day is invincible. And you get up, and then the rest of your day, you're unconscious. The 15 hours of your day. So you're going to weigh 1 hour of being in a different state of being against 15 hours of you being unhappy and rushing and in a program. So then, how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's called change. How many times do we have to go unconscious to the point where we no longer go unconscious and we stay conscious? That's the moment of change. Now, if you're truly out of the bleachers and you're on the playing field, and this happens to a lot of people in our work, they say, I really believe that this is the truth. I really believe that you could heal yourself. I really believe you could change your life. I've seen the testimonials. I just never believed that it could happen to me. Now, this is a big moment. Now you're really stepping on the playing field. So a person who starts doing their work, they're not interested in healing. The person who's truly interested in this work, they understand that the only way they can heal is that they have to change. They're not saying, I'm going to wait for my wealth or my healing to happen in order for me to feel grateful and be joyful in life. They're saying, if I feel grateful, my healing's going to begin, right? If I feel more whole, then there should be some change in my gene expression. So they've studied the content, they've studied the information, and now it becomes extremely practical. So they may have a great meditation, and we've seen this happen to many people. They sleep better, they have less pain, they have more energy, but their blood values never change. Now, they don't say, oh, I feel better, but I'm failing, this doesn't work. They say, what is it about me that's stopping this from completely healing? Okay, how am I in my waking day? The moment you begin to ask that question, you turn on the frontal lobe, and the frontal lobe is the seat of your conscience. Now, the moment you start looking at the end of your day, how did I do? This is such an important question. How did I do today? Did I fall from grace? When did I lose it? And who did I lose it with? If I had another opportunity, how would I do it differently? They'll tell you, I've seen them stand on the stage and tell their story and say, I had to start really watching myself in my life.
Yeah.
How I was emotionally responding to my ex, how I was emotionally responding to my financial problems. I had to really, really pay attention to that. And that takes an enormous amount of energy and an enormous amount of awareness to stop the program, right? So you forget and you go, damn, I went unconscious there. Now, you didn't lose, you didn't fail. You just became conscious. Now, if you keep becoming so conscious of your unconscious states, you're outside the program. You're only in the program when you're unconscious.
Yeah.
The moment you're conscious, you can objectify your subjective self. So you can see yourself through the eyes of someone else. So the learning process comes from the mistake. The brain learns by mistakes and surprises. I've made enough of them in my life. It's just whether you're going to do it again.
Yeah.
You want to do it again, you're back in the habit, back in the routine. If you say, this is it, the next time that happens, I am not going to do that. Not for anybody else, but because those emotions actually, my response to that person or that circumstance is actually weakening the organism. Is that person, that circumstance worth it? So then it's evolution. It's evolution. The challenge then has to be met with a greater level of mind. Now, if you're just doing your meditation just because you want to please God or do the right thing or feel good about yourself, that's going to get stale after a while because it's just going to become another routine between your coffee and your shower and your emails and your drive to work, and people aren't present, right? So the familiar past, conditioning is based on the past, that thought and the feeling, but habituation is the programming them to predictable future. That's the known. So if you teach a person how to find the present moment, that's where the unknown exists. And that takes a lot of energy and a lot of awareness. And yet, if you practice it, the body literally will begin to respond to the mind. It's like training an animal. It finally relaxes. And when that occurs, your response to people and circumstances in your life will be different because you overcame yourself at the beginning of the day. So I'm an early morning guy just like you. I get up really early. Why? Because nobody bothers me.
What time?
4:30-ish, somewhere around there.
And then what do you do?
I get in my think box.
What's the think box?
Well, okay, what am I doing today? But I'm not going to sit down and just jump into a meditation. What thoughts, before I go into this meditation, am I going to stay away from? Well, what circumstances, what things I can think about later that aren't that important to me? What emotions, what memories am I going to stay away from? If I go there, I know what that's going to do. I mean, why am I doing this meditation? What am I going to be doing? How am I going to do it? So I just like anybody who does anything really well, you get in your think box and you organize what you're going to do.
Are you doing this in bed, or are you having coffee first? Or?
I just get up, move around a little bit, do a few things, maybe write some notes down, because then I can assign meaning to the act. I can stay conscious when I'm in it.
So you do all this before your meditation? Okay.
Always. But then when I get in my play box, there's no thinking. I did all my thinking in my think box.
You did all your thinking in your think box. Is that also when sometimes we wake up and there's these kind of thoughts that are just popping up, is you writing down a few things, is you processing them, a way of sort of quietening down the noise so that you can drop into meditation?
Yeah, so let's say I have 10 Zoom meetings in one day. I look at my calendar and I go, okay, none of that, I'm going to get to all of that. This is not my time to think about the known. I know all this stuff is going to work out. I know how the Zoom meetings are going to go. Okay, but let me just make sure when I'm in these certain Zoom meetings that I'm leading with my heart and I'm being the person that I want to be as an example for my team. I want to make sure I'm communicating really clearly. I'll make time for this, that. Okay, I get all that out of the way. Well, that's all the known stuff. But when I come to execute now, well, what am I going to do to open my heart today? Like, what am I really going to do? When I do the breath to bring energy into my brain, what am I bringing? Like, where am I going to go to that? What do I want to experience? How do I do that? Let me just review that. Okay, then I'm going to open my focus. I'm going to go deep into nothing. I'm going to go as far as I can. And then when I get to that point, then I'm going to create. And when I create, this is what I'm going to create. So I'm not thinking in when I'm there, what should I create? I've already got that all worked out. I'm rehearsing. I'm getting clear on what I'm going to do. I'm getting clear on what I'm not going to do. I'm getting clear on how my last meditation was and how I want to evolve my next meditation. So then when I get to my play box, I'm not analyzing and thinking, because if I'm analyzing and thinking, I can't do it, right? So I get that worked out. If it takes me half an hour, I allow for 2 hours for myself. If it takes me half an hour to get very clear, and then sometimes there's disturbing things that I have to get through because there's meetings and stuff like that. But I just go, that is all always going to work out. This is you. This is your time.
It's interesting, Dr. Joe, that for many of us, for many people, meditation is almost like your pre-day ritual. Right, so you meditate to prime yourself for your day, how you're going to be. But when you talk about your morning routine, you have a pre-meditation ritual.
Yeah,
which I find really, really interesting.
Because I want to get into it. I want to assign meaning. To what I'm doing. When you assign meaning to the act, you turn on your prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex says, "Quiet. Everybody that's not involved in this intention, settle down." So the frontal lobe will actually lower the volumes of the circuits in the brain that are disturbance. So when you assign meaning to something, you get more value from it. So I just learned that if I just get in and just do my meditation, sometimes they're wonderful because I've done it enough times. But if I just drop in, it doesn't have any meaning. If it doesn't have any meaning, then it just becomes another routine. You're doing your meditation, but you're thinking about your coffee. You're drinking your coffee. You're already thinking about your emails. The brain's an anticipation machine, and we lose our free will to that kind of programming. So when I get my think box really clear, it's just like when I used to golf. I would just kind of look at where I was going to hit the ball. I was thinking about the club I was going to use, how I was going to swing, how I was going to feel. I work it all out in my think box. When I get my play box, I've done all my thinking. Now I'm just going to execute, right? So we found that when people do that, we do this in our week-long events. I'll always say to the audience, all right, after we come back from the break, so turn to someone now, and I want you to have a conversation about what you love about yourself, that you did really well in that last meditation. What did you stick? What felt right for you? What did you execute really well? I want you to articulate that and remind yourself, reproduce that same level of mind, install the neurological hardware by firing and wiring so you can step into that footprint and do that again in the next meditation. Then I say to them, now let's light a match in a dark place. If you had another opportunity to do another meditation, what would you bring? What would you work on improving? What would you become aware of that you don't want to do, that you did in that last meditation? Let's get really clear about what you're not going to do. And if you had another opportunity, what you would do. And somehow that kind of shapes the brain for the next experience, for them to evolve their experience, because they're in the experience now. They're like, oh yeah, I'm not getting off the exit of my job. I'm not getting off the exit of my ex. I'm going to go straight. I'm going to just keep, you can make those turns in the beginning. It's normal. But you start making those turns, and then all of a sudden you're realizing, I'm not going to make those turns, and you drive right past the exit. I drive right past, I'm too old. I drive right past, I'm too out of shape. I drive right past, my disease isn't going to go away. There's something wrong with me. You just keep driving past those, and the next thing you know, you run into something big. So it's trial and error, you know? I mean, this is like, it's so important for people to realize if it took them 2 years of chronic stress to develop their health condition, it's not going to go away in 2 meditations. You know what I tell them? I say, you're not that good. You're just not that
Yeah.
good. Like, just get real here. Like, 1 foot in the quantum world, 1 foot in the real world. I'm a pragmatist. I don't want to talk about quantum superimposition if it has no value in my life. I want to talk about what it is that evolves my experiences. So if you're truly in the game of change,
Yeah.
then you would be rehearsing how you were going to be in the next Zoom meeting if you were really off in the last one. If you wouldn't say, oh, I'm this way because of that person or that circumstance. That's that program of being a victim saying that person or that circumstance is actually controlling the way I feel and think. My response to that person is making me sick. It's actually weakening the organism. Okay, the next time I have that opportunity, if I'm truly in the game of evolution, let's see if I can stay in my heart and the whole time I'm not going to react. That would be a victory for me. That would be a victory. So then at the end of your day, you go, I actually kind of love myself. I actually got my behaviors to match my intentions. I got my actions equal to my thoughts. I had a new experience and it actually felt good. Hey, I'm going to do that again. And you start doing it with your children. You start doing it, opening the door for the person who's walking out of the office building. You start letting people go ahead of you in traffic. You're just cool. You're no longer in that vigilant state. Now, get enough people doing that, all of a sudden you start noticing your wife a little bit differently, or Rangan's all of a sudden starting to smile a little bit more. He seems way more relaxed and chilled. People are going to start getting relaxed and chilled around you because mirror neurons in the tribe say, hey, there's somebody doing something that I'd like to do. I just need evidence to be able to do it. And all of a sudden, you start developing a community of people that start behaving differently. What's the significance of that? That's called emergence. An emergent consciousness is that everybody's behaving differently. And that is what's going to change the world, you know?
Sorry to interrupt. If you are enjoying this content, there's loads more just like it on my channel. So please do take a moment to press subscribe, hit the notification bell, and now back to the conversation.
You know, one of the core ideas I get from your work is that we all have a choice. We can choose and practice the way that we want to feel so that we actually start feeling it every day. You mentioned victim mindset a little bit already, and I want to talk a little bit about that shortly because I think many people will say, I'm the way I am because of this. And we'll get to that in just a second. Before we move to that, for someone who is watching this or listening and is intrigued, and they go, okay, I understand, I've got a choice. I can practice feeling an elevated emotion. They also hear you saying that this can take time. If you spent 10 years in stress, it ain't going to happen overnight.
And sometimes it does, though.
But sometimes it can do. How quickly might someone, if they wake up and they don't reach for the phone and don't put the news on and they decide to engage in a meditation, maybe with a pre-meditation ritual like you do, how quickly might someone start to feel a difference? 1 day, 2 days? Or is it realistic that within 7 days, someone's going to start to feel quite differently?
Okay, let's talk about this because I don't want to mislead anybody. Knowledge is the forerunner to experience. The more people understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, the how gets easier. And this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. The practical application in understanding that philosophy, that theory, that intellectual knowledge, that information, once you start to apply it and personalize it and demonstrate it, the more you can understand that, why you're doing it and what you're doing it, you get greater value out of it. So we have people that are diagnosed with serious health conditions, that are nurses, that are cancer researchers, that are physicians, that are engineers, or just a person who just really wants to understand the content. Now, it's so much easier to forget this information than to remember it. It's just, I always laugh at myself because I have to go back and relearn it again, and I think I know it pretty well, and yet I forget. I don't know why, but it's just the way it is. So when our meditations get stale, it's because we forget what we're doing, right? So the person who really, really takes the time to study instead of watching Netflix, instead of scrolling through TikTok, instead of getting on their phone and doing mindless texts or whatever, they're going to set aside an hour a day and I'm going to learn this information. When they sit down to do the work, they're present.
Yeah.
They understand if they feel this emotion, that they're going to signal a new gene in a new way. If they feel the other emotion, they're going to downregulate that gene and upregulate the gene for their disease. So now it's an understanding.
Yeah.
If I rehearse how I'm going to be mentally, I'm going to install the hardware in my brain. If I keep doing it, it's going to become a software program. I'm going to start acting that way. Okay, if I say I can't, it's too hard, I'm too tired, I don't feel good, those are the things that stop me. Okay, but what if I just start saying anything is possible? I believe in synchronicities. What if I, with my intention and attention, just really get clear on that? Would that be the new voice in my head? So now, the person who's truly present and not thinking about their shower or the emails they have to do or their cell phone or their texts or when they have to take their kids to ballet or whatever, you're going to get to all of that. The person who's truly present, if they follow the instructions, we've seen them have very significant changes. First, in their subjective experience of themselves. Like, wow, my back pain isn't there. That's kind of weird. Or, God, I slept better last night. These small indicators or feedback to tell you that whatever you're doing inside of you is producing a result outside of you. Keep that up over a period of time, and you see instrumental changes taking place in the person. Now, another person who has had a series of traumas, been abused in some way from childhood, is facing a lot of health conditions, a lot of emotional and psychological conditions. We don't want them to heal in 1 week. We want them to work on overcoming those emotional states, and those are the victories. So sitting down in the meditation, and when their body starts getting agitated or starts getting anxious, instead of quitting and saying, I can't meditate, because that would be the extent of that person, just be curious. What's on the other side of this? Can I lower the volume to this emotion? My body's craving this emotion. Let me settle it down into the present moment. That would be a victory.
So that person with a lot of trauma, there's a moment in the meditation where they feel uncomfortable. The easy thing would be, hey, I'm going to stop. I'm going to put on Instagram. I'm going to get a coffee. I'm going to do anything else to distract me. You're saying that's the key moment. You want to sit with that and hopefully break through that.
What I'm saying is there's no such thing as a bad meditation. There's only you overcoming you. People think I'm doing my meditation wrong. No, you're doing it right.
Even if it's difficult.
That is the moment that is going to define the person. So then the person goes, oh, God, I feel really uncomfortable. I'm not a good meditator. There's something wrong with me. It's my trauma. It's my past. It's my parents. It's whatever. The person who says, no, I'm going to sit in the presence of this anxiety, and I'm going to keep working with my body, and I'm going to keep lowering the volume to that emotion. Now, listen, you keep lowering the volume to that emotion, you're going to take your attention off that past problem, because you only put your attention on that past problem because of the emotion.
A lot of this is a complete paradigm shift for the current way most of society is and the way modern society is kind of taught, whether it be at school or university. If I talk through the lens of a medical doctor and looking at the health of my patients, for many years I have said that, listen, we're missing lots of key skills as medical doctors because, what we've learned can be really good for acute problems and emergency situations, but it doesn't tend to work so well for these chronic conditions that didn't happen overnight, that they have developed because of our lifestyle. And I've said many times in the media over the last few years that about 80% of what we see is in some way connected to our collective modern lifestyles. I'm not putting blame on people. I'm just saying it's the way we are living these days is leading to not just things like obesity, type 2 diabetes, but also anxiety, depression, migraines, gut problems, low libido, whatever this barrage of problems we're now seeing as doctors is. But I've got to say, over the last few years, I've been wondering, well, yes, I still maintain that's the case, and I still want to make and help people make those lifestyle changes. But actually, I've realized it's not the root cause. It's not, I can go further upstream. Yes, lifestyle is important. If I can help people change, yes, it changes their downstream consequences on their health. But the way we think, our mental well-being, our happiness, I have actually come to the conclusion over the last year, so that's even more important than lifestyle, because if we change the way we think and approach the world and respond to people and external events rather than, unconsciously reacting, well, that creates a new environment in our body where we naturally make better lifestyle choices. In fact, those lifestyle choices no longer feel like an effort, because a lot of the time, those lifestyle behaviors are simply a way for us to manage the stress in our lives. Would you how would you see that? Do you agree with that? Do you have a different perspective? I'm just very, very interested to hear your thoughts.
No, I absolutely agree with it. I absolutely do. And I think that the one thing, that if it took you 5 years of living in chronic stress and what are the emotions of stress and survival? Aggression, anger, hatred, competition, judgment, insecurity, envy, jealousy, pain, suffering, guilt, shame, fear, anxiety, depression, hopelessness, powerlessness. Those are all derived from the hormones of stress. And psychology calls the normal human states of consciousness. Those are altered states of consciousness. And so then if you're living in emergency and your response to your coworker, to your boss, to the traffic, to the news, to whatever it is, weakens the organism, and you're switching on that emergency system over time. No organism can live in emergency mode for an extended period of time. You're drawing from the body's vital resources, and you're converting all of its energy into chemistry for some threat, real or imagined. Okay, so then if you keep doing that in chronic conditions, there's no energy for growth and repair.
To make sure you're taking action after watching this video, I've created a free breathing guide that's going to help you reduce stress, calm your mind, and boost your energy. In this guide, I share with you 6 really simple breathing practices that work immediately. Even just 1 minute a day will start to make a big difference. To receive your free guide, all you have to do is click on the link in the description box below.
There's no energy for long-term building projects. The immune system dials down. The digestive system becomes out of phase. Hormones change. Our cardiovascular system changes. Our respiratory system changes. This is because the body is believing it's living in a dangerous environment, okay? So the problem then becomes that the arousal of these stress hormones that create fear, that create anger, aggression, or create pain, give the body a rush of energy. Now, people become almost like an addict. They need the problems in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that arousal, to that emotion. Yeah. And now, if you can turn that response on by thought alone, number 1, you become addicted to your own thoughts. And number 2, you become addicted to the very life, the life that you don't even like.
Yeah.
So then you ask the person, why are you this way? And they'll say, I am this way because of this event that happened to me 5 years ago. Well, what that really means is they had some really profoundly emotional experience. And the stronger the emotion we feel, the more altered we feel inside of us, the more we pay attention to what causes it. And the brain freezes a frame and takes a snapshot. And that's called the long-term memory. And so then that person then is altered biologically from that trauma, from that event. And what they don't know is every time they remember the event, they're producing the same chemistry in their brain and body as if the event was occurring. Okay, well then you tell the person, why are you this way? Well, then they'll tell the story about how it happened. And the research on memory says that 50% of that story, the way you recount it, is actually not accurate. It's actually not the truth. That people don't have the same brain, so they embellish the story to excuse themselves from changing. And if they make it more difficult or they add more components to it, then now they'll reaffirm their identity in being a certain way. That story becomes very important to them. And they believe it, they behave it as it, and they ultimately become it. And so then can you use those same principles and begin to start to manage your inner world? And by regulating, taking the time before you start your day and say, okay, before I grab my cell phone, before I get up and run through my routine, my automatic routine where people's are on automatic pilot and a habituation of what they did yesterday, and their body's dragging them into the same predictable future based on what they did in the past, and they've lost their free will to choose, to become conscious to a set of automatic programs. Well, if the familiar past is the known and the predictable future is the known, there's only one place where the unknown exists, and that's the sweet spot of the present moment. So if you said, okay, let me get present here. Let me remind myself of those thoughts I don't want to think. Let me remind myself of the behaviors I want to change. Let me review in my mind the emotions that caused me to move to a lower denominator. Let me become so conscious of that I won't go unconscious again. Let me remind myself who I do want to be, how I do want to think, how I do want to act, how I do want to feel. And let me see if I can get so good at doing this with my eyes closed when I start my day that I can do it with my eyes open. Now, this river of change, people say, I can't predict my future. Well, the best way to predict it is to create it, not in the known, but in the unknown. So our research shows that if you teach a person to go a little further than where they normally stop, when they get uncomfortable, they quit and reach for their cell phone, or they say, I'm busy, got too much to do. If you get people present, really, and you teach them how to stretch a little further, and they get beyond that known, and there's no danger, there's no threat, there's no survival, the body actually begins to relax into the present moment. Yeah. And when that happens, we see this over and over again. Energy moves right into the heart. And now the heart, all of a sudden, starts to beat with more order, more coherence. The autonomic nervous system is no longer dysregulated from stress. It's starting to organize, and this feeling feels right? So then if you can sustain that state, independent of the conditions in your environment, then you're mastering your environment. You're mastering your life. Yeah. The response most of the times, if you don't change your response to the conditions in your life, then nothing will change, including you. So in chronic stress, then, the person who's living in chronic stress, they're mismanaging their attention, because when you're in stress is created by, you can't predict something, you've lost control, or you have the perception that something's getting worse. And so look at the world we live in right now. People are in chronic stress. They don't know that, but now they need the arousal to wake them up, and then they need something outside of them, their cell phone, a TV, whatever it is, a movie, a drug or drink, whatever it is, to make that feeling go away. And once you notice the change in that internal state, you pay attention to what caused it, and now you're more reliant on the outer environment. So then, is it possible then to teach a person then to create more coherence in their brain and heart? And we have data suggest that you could change your brain in 4 days and make it work better. You can make your heart, you can trade resentment, impatience, frustration for elevated emotions, and train people how to create more coherence in their heart. The side effect of that, doing that every day, we've done the research, will strengthen your immune system up to 50%. Why? Because your response isn't weakening you. You're not victim to your environment. Yeah. So if you're not victim to your environment, then you're less susceptible to anything in your environment, large or small or tiny or microbes or whatever. Yeah. So then, when the person understands that, then they say, oh my God, this hatred, this fear, this anger that I've become so accustomed to, I literally have to change that. And when we do, you have to understand that the body's going to crave the familiar feelings, because that's what it's used to. And this is the work. And people come to our work and they say, I think I'm doing my meditation wrong, because their body's getting aroused and they're getting frustrated. I say, no. You're actually doing it right. So now, instead of reaching for your cell phone, we'll give you something to do. Settle your body back down from that emotional state. Yeah. Tell it it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind, and that's a victory. Then the person goes, I don't like this feeling, I don't know what I'm doing, and I want to get up, I want to quit, I want to go eat, when's this end? And they become conscious. Their body wants to move into the predictable future. And now they're going to execute a will that's greater than the program and return the body back to the present moment. That's a victory also. And if we keep doing this over and over again, and the stronger the emotions we feel, the more we pay attention to it. So every problem, every person in your life that you have an emotion associated with, you give them your attention. So as you lower the volume to your emotions, you take your attention off your personal life. And the only way you're going to change your personal reality then is to get beyond your personality. And the only way you're going to change your personal reality is to get beyond your memory of all the associations to your personal reality. And if you're going to heal your body, you got to get beyond your body. So you got to get beyond its habituations. You got to get beyond its emotional responses. And you got to tell the body it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind. And in the beginning, it's tedious, but working with your body like training an animal. We notice that there's a liberation of energy, and the person then who goes a little further than they normally go, instead of reaching for their cell phone or posting something on social media, they're going to stick with it and be curious. What's on the other side of this limited thought? What's on the other side of this familiar emotion? What's on the other side of this complaining and judging and analyzing? What's on the other side of it? Now, there's not a lot of agreement in society that says, Rangan, you have to sit with yourself and to know thyself, to become so conscious of those unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that I won't go unconscious again. And we found out that it's the overcoming process that is the becoming process. And people continue to overcome, and then they become that other person biologically.
Yeah, I mean, this is so powerful. You mentioned curiosity. I think that's such a wonderful emotion, thought, feeling, value for us all to have and approach our life with. What might it look like if I didn't wake up and feel like this every day? Even just to imagine that that's a possibility, be curious about that. I think that's very empowering. You also said that many of us have become addicted to a life that we don't even like. That has stayed with me. That is so powerful, and I think people really need to sit with that. You mentioned rehearsal, but we're rehearsing, many of us, these negative emotions. We're rehearsing stress. We're getting better at being in stress because we're practicing every day. And you're offering a possibility to say, hey, listen, it may be uncomfortable at first. We know, we talk about comfort zones, right? Go for a longer run than usual. Go out your comfort zone. Have a cold shower, right? Get out your comfort zone. But what your work, I think, speaks to is that we can get out of our comfort zone in our minds. So not with physical actions, but in our minds. Let's get out of your comfort zone. Think differently. And I wrote down this comment on YouTube, Dr. Joe, which on one of your many videos that have got millions of views on, there was this comment at the top. I watched this video a year ago. It completely changed my life. I got rid of 15 years of depression. I lost 15 kilos of weight. I got 1,200 meters more to my Cooper test. I turned my company from the gates of bankruptcy into profit and established 3 more companies. I've not been sick once after this. I basically addicted myself to the positive. And to me, real experiences like that really, I think, speak to the power of your work. There's a real empowerment that you're giving people. A lot of people, Dr. Joe, may be struggling and going, okay, look, I get that. Yes, I don't like the way that I think, but I don't know how to change that, right? So in terms of moving this into maybe some practical things people can do, firstly, you need awareness. Hopefully this conversation is giving people that awareness. But if people are not aware, how can they become aware? And once they become aware, what sort of things should they start to do to start making those changes?
Yeah, thank you for teasing that out. That's such a great question. My interest is to give people the tools so that they have within their reach all the things they need to begin to apply and become scientists in their life. People don't know, if you don't know that those stress hormones are addictive, then you think they have power over you. If you don't think that you can change your thought, just because you have a thought, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And when the moment I realized that, I was free, right? And if you isolate yourself a lot and you're not out in the world because of whatever, you'll start to believe every thought that you think is the truth. And so that challenge then of saying, okay, I do truly want to be happy. I do truly want to be healthy. I do truly want to have a life that is really empowering, that I feel good about. Okay, well, let's take a look, like if no different than, well, you use the example of Tiger Woods, no different than Tiger Woods watching himself swing on a video, observing himself play. No different than a person who stands in front of an audience and does a lecture and watches them do the lecture. Nobody else will see what they see. They'll see themselves very differently than anybody else, and they'll see themselves do it, and they'll want to self-correct. They'll want to evolve their experience. Now, because we got this big frontal lobe, 40% of our entire brain, that's our conscience. That's the seat of our awareness. That's our creative center. When we ask the question, what would it be like to be in a different life or to be happy? If instead of getting on your cell phone, or instead of getting on your social media, or instead of turning on the TV, or instead of calling a friend, and instead of doing something to distract you from that possible answer, if you sat with it long enough and that creative center turned on, it would naturally scan the whole entire landscape of the brain, because it's the CEO, it's the symphony leader, it has connections to all parts of the brain. And it's going to look out over the landscape of the brain and look at the knowledge you've learned and the experiences that are stitched in your brain that are associated with what you know to answer that question. And as it calls up these different networks of neurons, once the brain fires in tandem, you get an image or a picture in your mind, and that's called intention. You see a new possibility, right? So then, this is why I am passionate about what we're doing. I never thought, Rangan, that I would see the kind of changes in people's physical health that I've seen in the last 2 years. Now, people do the best with what they think is available. If you don't know that this is possible, you are going to make the same choice. And that may be relying on some pharmaceutical, something outside of you, some therapy, whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. But if your response hasn't changed in your life, the efficacy of whatever you're doing is going to be diminished. Okay, so once I now know that people could heal from different health conditions, and there's evidence in the science and there's evidence in testimony, like the person that you just recited, that's one of many, many people that have had that experience. When they stand on the stage at our week-long retreats, and we call them up. Why do I call them up on the stage? Because they are speaking the truth. They are the example of truth. And I want people to become aware of that possibility. Why? Because if you're unaware of it, it doesn't exist for you. Consciousness is awareness, right? And so then with consciousness, you can't have consciousness without energy. So that thought of another possibility is a different energy. It's a different possibility. And so now, once you know it's possible, then, okay, now let's get down to stepping in the footprints that other people have left behind. Why? If you're telling the story of your past every single day, and 50% of that isn't even the truth, then you're reliving a miserable life that you never even had. All for the reason to excuse yourself from change. Stop telling the story of your past and start telling the story of your future. Stop romancing your past and start romancing your future. Why not fall in love with your future as much as you've fallen in love with your past? If I do this as an experiment, and you're scientifically minded, make your life the experiment. Make your life the experiment. Okay, I'm going to be uncomfortable if I start making different choices. Okay, but I'm not going to white knuckle it and stay in this unknown. No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work on making my brain work better. Let's work on making my heart work better. Let's put the whole thing together and let's practice. Yeah. And so then in the beginning, if it doesn't happen in 2 days, most people quit. Why? Because Amazon Prime can deliver to your door in a day, and you're used to that kind of entitlement of convenience. creating really and making change. If it took you 5 years to develop this health condition, it may take you a little time to uncreate it. But what you're looking for is those small, subtle shifts in your life and in your body. Once you start seeing those changes take place, now you're more invested. And you can't believe in a new future without believing in yourself. And you can't believe in yourself without believing in a new future. You have to choose yourself every single day. So the person when the drugs and everything else wasn't working, they were their own resource, and they understood that this was their medicine. And so every day they said, how did I do at the end of my day? When did I fall from grace? When did I go unconscious? When did I return back to the old me? Let me rehearse it. Tomorrow I want to evolve my experience. And it was no longer about healing. It was about changing. And they stand on the stage and they say, oh God, I just realized that I have to work on this more with my eyes open. I have to stay in this emotional state. I have to keep the vision alive in my mind. And it's so much easier to forget that vision of your future than to remember it. And it takes repetition and practice. And there is a very strong change that goes on when people start making the effort. So simple thing to do, wake up in the morning before you reach for your cell phone, ask yourself, who do I no longer want to be? Let me write down the thoughts today. Let me become so conscious of this is horrible, I hate my life. Let's just stop that thought, because that thought is going to produce a chemical that's going to signal your body to feel a certain way. Let's become aware of how I behave. Write down 2 behaviors. Do I complain? Do I blame? Do I rush? Write them down and just commit them. Review them in your mind. What emotions do I want to no longer feel today, or at least stay conscious of? Do I feel sadness? Do I feel suffering? Do I feel fear? Do I feel anxiety? Let me just become conscious of those. And if I start feeling that, I just want to become aware and see if I can change it. Okay, what do I want to change to? When I feel that, let me think this way. Let me review that. Let me review how I'm going to behave. Let me rehearse it in my mind. Let me teach my body emotionally. I want to be able to feel this feeling over and over again so well. I'll keep practice feeling it till I can feel it on command. Wow. Now that's greatness. That's getting out of the bleachers and getting on the playing field. And it's not going to be a linear process. But catching yourself, and when it matters the most is when it's the hardest. That's when it matters the most.
Yeah, I mean, it's just wonderful, right? Wonderful hearing you speak with such passion. I love that idea that we should be our own experiment, because what I'm hearing is, listen, there's no side effects there. Well, there's no negative side effects there. Try it, right? Try it. There's no downside to trying to change the way that you think and practicing it and developing it like a skill. And I think that's the thing for me. This is a skill that you can practice, you can get better at. Just as if you you practice running, you may get faster and run for further distances. Well, let's also practice thinking in a different way. So I thought that was really important for people to have in the front of their minds. I practice on myself. I am in my early 40s and genuinely have never felt this good, Dr. J. Calm, content, happy. I know I'm responsible for my emotions and my thoughts. So I've now trained probably over 5 or 6 years to get to the point now where external events I don't allow them anymore to influence my state. And what you said about it not being linear. Yeah, I have a daily practice, a morning routine, which has a bit of meditation, a bit of breath work, a bit of positive mindsets. And you just keep showing up. You keep doing it. And then before you know it, you're in some sort of you're in a situation in life that previously you would have found incredibly stressful and gone on a negative, just like this negative mindset afterwards, which would have led to all kinds of compensatory behaviors. And you're like, oh, wow, I didn't react to that. I could see that big space between stress and response. And I want to be respectful to your time, but I'd love to just briefly cover meditation and brainwaves if you had time, because I think, again, it's really helpful for people to understand that.
Okay, well, let's demystify it. I looked it up. I looked up the symbol. What does that symbol that represents meditation mean? And the actual translation of the word means to become familiar with. That's what it means. So then when you become conscious of your unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, and become familiar with them, if you can become so conscious that you don't go unconscious and you're facing off with your old self and you have those thoughts, you're in a meditation, that's a good thing, right? And if you can fire and wire the new thoughts and rehearse the new behaviors and practice trading the chemicals of survival for elevated emotions, and you keep practicing those heart-centered emotions, they'll begin to become familiar to you. So breaking the habit of the old self and reinventing the new self, unlearning and relearning is the model of change, okay? But when you're living in stress and you're living in survival and the brain is aroused, what we're doing when we lost control or we can't predict what's going to happen is we try to control and predict everything in our life. And the arousal of the stress hormones causes our brain to move in these brainwave states called high beta. Now, we're talking right now, and we're in low-level beta. We're in beta, and beta is conscious awareness. So we're aware that we're local in a body. We're occupying a body in space and time, in an environment and time. And the sensory system is picking up all this vital information through our senses from the environment. And beta brainwaves happen to create coherence between our inner world and our outer world. No problem there. If I said, oh, there'll be a dinner tonight, and I'm going to invite you. There'll be 10 people there, and please just remember all their names. Your brain would kind of pick up into like a mid-range beta state. It's not a bad stress. It's just that you got to get a little bit, the light bulb gets a little brighter. You got to get a little bit more aware, a little bit more awake. But when you're frustrated, when you're angry, when you're impatient, when you're resentful, when you're fearful, you're in these high beta brainwave patterns. And then that high beta is the alarm, it's the alert, it's emergency, there's a threat, there's a danger. So we shift our attention from one person, to another problem, to another meeting, to another thing, to another place, to the past. And every one of those circuits in our brain that are associated with everything we know in our life starts to light up out of order, like a lightning storm in the cloud, because our attention is shifting. Turns out the brain starts firing very incoherently, and we over-focus on things. Why? Because we don't want them to happen again. And so the arousal causes this incoherence in the brain, and when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. And the person in survival, the primitive system is saying, focus on matter, narrow your focus on the danger, focus on something material. And why does that happen? Because the senses heighten and we become materialists. So you're not going to be thinking about anything else if something's rustling in the bushes and it's dark. You're going to pay attention to that, right? So this kind of habituation of narrowing our focus or over-focusing becomes the common way people think when they're in survival. They think that's focus. So we said, okay, how are we going to teach people how to change waves? So what if they go from a narrow focus and focusing on objects in the material world to broadening their focus or creating a divergent focus instead of a convergent focus, and opening their focus and focusing on nothing but space, nothing known, nothing material. And the act of sensing space tends to slow the brain waves down and start to suppress the analytical mind. When you're in survival, you're in stress, you're overly analytical. And our research shows that if you're analyzing yourself and you're analyzing the problems in your life within that aroused emotional state, 100% of the time you'll make your brain worse. You'll drive it further into those high beta states. And that's like driving your sports car in first gear on the freeway. It just won't work in time. So as you broaden your focus and you sense nothing, the act of sensing and feeling causes you to stop analyzing and thinking, and your brain waves start to go down into a slower brainwave state, and you get past the analytical mind and you move into what's called alpha brainwaves. Now, alpha brainwaves, in beta, your outer world is more real than your inner world. In alpha, your inner world starts becoming more real than the outer world, and the voice in your head, that default that's talking to you all the time, tends to shut off, and the brain starts to imagine. It starts to see in images and pictures. That's alpha. It's an imaginary state. It's a creative state. But when you're sensing space, what happens that's so unique is those different compartments of the brain that were subdivided when the person is sensing space not only moves into alpha, the brain starts to synchronize. The different communities of neurons that were firing out of order start to resonate in coherence and order, and the front of the brain is starting to resonate with both sides of the brain, and all of a sudden you're seeing more community of neurons coming together, and what syncs in the brain links in the brain. Now, when the person has coherent alpha brainwave patterns, now all of a sudden the brain becomes more integrated and they can start to hold an image and focus or dream or imagine. We all do this when we're driving in the car on the freeway, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. But then if you can get your body to relax even further so that it's in a light sleep, that it feels so safe that it could actually rest in a light sleep while you're conscious and awake, relaxed and awake. You're in a brainwave pattern called theta. Now, in theta, lights go out in the thinking neocortex. The memory bank, the autobiographical self, is literally shut off. Your connection to the environment, to your body and to time literally changes. If lights go out on the neocortex, then you get beyond your identity. And we see then, when a person's in theta, the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open to information. And when you get beyond the analytical mind, then you open the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. That's what separates it, the analytical mind. Now you're suggestible to the information. You're in a hypnotic state. And you can rewrite a program. You can rewrite a new script. You can change the way you behave. You can change the way you can reprogram yourself to do something differently. And you can't do it in high beta because you're not in the operating system. You got to get beyond the conscious mind into the subconscious mind to rewrite those programs. So teaching people how to regulate and change their brainwaves is an important element. But what about the heart? Because to create a new future, it requires a clear intention and an elevated emotion. It is the fundamental quality of brain and heart coherence. So then can you practice breathing through your heart and practice regulating your heart and practice bringing up these elevated emotions and feel it with your heart? And our data suggests that if you place your attention on your heart and you just do that for a few minutes, you'll actually give the heart a very low frequency, and that very low frequency is indigenous to the energy of the heart. So the heart starts building a little energetic field. Once that happens, the heart will inform the brain through the afferent fibers. They'll say, it's time to create, or it's safe to create. And when the heart gets coherent, it sends a very profound signal, like grabbing a big sheet and giving it a little whip. There's a wave of energy that goes to the brain, and all of a sudden you see the heart and the brain start synchronizing. And now we're in a creative state. And the heart produces an external magnetic field that's up to 3 meters wide, and now we start feeling more whole. Now we feel like our future has already happened, and we're no longer looking for it. Why would we look for it if it felt like it already happened? And we're really relaxing into the present moment. So teaching people how to regulate their brain waves and move into these slower frequencies, people get really good at it. And we have the data that suggests you could be 91, you could be 7 years old, you could have a disease, you could not have a disease, you could eat gluten, not eat gluten, you could eat meat, you could drink wine, you could smoke cigarettes. It doesn't matter. It's just people, once they learn the skill on how to change their brainwaves, they can open the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. But intention is not enough. Intention is the directive. It's like the electrical charge in the field. The elevated emotion is the magnetic charge. It's what feels like the future has already happened for us. So brain and heart coherence, when you do that together, in a sense, you have a Wi-Fi signal. The body's emitting information and energy. And so we teach that as a way for people to really practice getting beyond their analytical facilities. And when they're able to do that, as we said over and over in this talk, it just becomes natural. It just becomes automatic. It just becomes a skill.
I know you and your team teach a lot of these methods and meditations at retreats in all kinds of different ways. For someone who feels inspired by what you've said and thinks, you know what, I want to dip my toe in here. You know, meditation is all the rage these days. Many people from lots of different fields are talking about it. Is what you teach a specific type of meditation? Do you feel that all kinds of meditation have value for people to at least get going on this journey of opening up to space and just stopping the analytical mind?
You know, I mean, if the environment is so seductive, and and if our body has been conditioned and habituated to be the mind, and we're either living in the predictable future or the familiar past, it makes so much sense to start our day to disconnect from the environment, to settle our body down into the present moment and get beyond its drives, its emotions and habits. That's the act, right? So we teach no specific form of traditional, cultural, religious meditation. In fact, that usually divides an audience. We look at the data. We look at the data, and we look at what exactly it is that either I say or the combination of everything put together with the sound and everything that produces these elegant states. Now, there's just not enough time, but I can tell you when a person gets really, really in the zone, they hit a really transcendental moment when they get to that point of theta and they go into an arousal. But the arousal is not fear, the arousal is not pain, the arousal is not aggression, the arousal is ecstasy. They're connecting. And that's the moment where we see an instantaneous biological upgrade that goes on in the person's body. Energy starts to inform matter, and we're lucky enough to be able to catch that on different brain scans. So then it makes sense then that knowledge is the precursor to experience. So you got to learn, you got to understand what you're doing and why you're doing. You got to demystify the process. It's got to make sense to you. Yeah. That's why we have so many men in our events, because the men love the science. They're like, I'm not going to listen to my wife. It doesn't make sense to me, but she's all intuitive and feeling. But this, I can do this. It makes sense to me. So then when it makes sense to you, so then, as an example, we have this little course called the Formula. And the formula really is the understanding of brain and heart coherence. It's 30-minute lectures with 5 meditations. I think there's 12 or 13 sessions. Easy, digestible way to understand it. Then once you understand the knowledge, you'll say, okay, let me try working on the present moment. Okay, now that I got that down, let me try this. And so we build, step by step, because I want to set people up for success. And I want to set it up so that it's within the realm of their acceptance, where they don't go, oh my God, this guy's killing me. I got a busy day here and I can't sit here. But if it's in increments and it's digestible and you can understand why you're doing it and what you're doing it, then the how gets very easy. And that's what we want people to do, to experiment. Let me try this out for 2 weeks and let's see if anything changes in my life. If it does, I'm going to keep doing it. Now, so communities of people, we have, a huge community around the world. And what I love the most about our community is we're doers. They don't go, oh God, I got to meditate today. No, they meditate because they don't want the magic to end in their lives. They're doing it because events, they're no longer going anywhere to get what they want. Somehow it seems like it's coming to them. Yeah. They're a magnet. They're synchronicities, the serendipities, the coincidences, the opportunities are coming to them as a result of doing the work. And now they're believing less that they're the victims of their life. And now every coincidence, every opportunity informs them that they are the creator of their life. And now the game starts to change, because now if you truly believe that you are the creator of your life, then you got to make time to create and you got to experiment in the game called life. Yeah,
it's so powerful. I think at the very least, I think this conversation will have inspired people to say, I can change the way I think. I can maybe start my day by not letting inputs in from the external world, keep the cell phone off, keep the TV off, keep the news off, spend some time with myself, thinking, rehearsing. Even that would be a great start for people, just to start changing the pattern, the addiction to the life that they currently have. If we had longer, there's so much more I would have spoken to you about. Maybe we could do a part 2 at some point in the future. But before you leave, Dr. Joe, this podcast is called Feel Better, Live More. When we feel better in ourselves, we get more out of our life. And I think it's very clear from your research and your years of service to people that when we think better, when we think differently, we're going to get more out of our life. Have you got any final thoughts or words to people who are struggling? They don't know where to turn. They think the way that they currently feel is the way that they always are going to feel. And they're getting a little bit of inspiration here. Have you got any final words for them to help, set them off on that journey?
Yeah, it's really simple. You already know how to do this. Everybody on this podcast has done something great in their life. Everybody's done something great. And what happened? you got a crazy idea, and that you stuck with that idea long enough for you to begin to feel the emotions of that future before it happened, and no person, no circumstance, no condition in your life would talk you out of that future. And people who truly make the change. I mean, it's some people say, well, I believe in this. I just believe it works for everybody else, but it doesn't work for me. Now, this is a defining moment. So you got to make a decision then. And you got to make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries a level of energy that causes your body to respond to your mind, that the choice that you make to change your life becomes a moment in time that you never forget. And the stronger the emotion you feel in that choice, the more you'll remember that decision. And that's a huge explosion in the quantum field. And you're giving your body a taste of the future emotionally. And if we did that every day and got up from our meditations or our inward introspection or contemplation differently than when we started, and if you can maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day, get ready, because weird things are going to begin to happen in your life. It's the law, and they're going to come in ways that you would never predict, that you would never expect, because if you can predict it and expect it, it's the known. It's got to come in a way that surprises us, that leaves no doubt that what we're doing inside of us is producing some effect outside of us. And the moment we correlate the changes we're making inside of us with the effect we're producing outside of us, we're going to pay attention to what we did and we're going to do it again. And that's when we start to become more of the creator of our lives instead of the victim of our lives. We know how to do this. We already know how to do it. The brain is wired to be creative. It's just that we have to learn how to break the survival state and those automatic thoughts and those habituations of behaviors and the emotions that we live by every single day, to a point that when we overcome it, we become somebody else. And who gets to be the beneficiary of that? We do. And then the people in our life that we love, and then our community, and ultimately the world. And we can, people in our work always say this. They walk back into their life, and people say, "Hey, what's up with you? You're different. What is it? What did you do? Did you look differently? What happened?" And they're like, "No." And what's happening is the person is showing up, and the person who's viewing them, the memory of them isn't fitting in any longer. The person's out of phase. We see people how we remember them, and all of a sudden something's different about that person. And why is that important? Because there's nothing wrong with reacting. We all react. The question is how long you react. If your response, like you said earlier, has changed to challenges or conditions in your life, and people notice that, you're giving them permission in their life to do the same. Mm-hmm. You're not saying, "Hey, watch me. Hey, this is how you need to change." This is the time in history where you say, "Let me show you what compassion looks like. Let me demonstrate leadership from my heart. Let me show you. I want to give you permission because of mirror neurons that this is the way it works." And what happens is an emergent consciousness starts to take place. An emergent consciousness in a week-long retreat with 1,600 people may start in one state of mind and body, but by the end of that week, there's an emergent consciousness, and people are completely, the pro-social networks in their brain are activated, they're communing, they're connecting, they're more present, more appreciative of the moment. That's the natural state of being. So is it worth the effort? You ask the person who never missed a day of 18 months of doing their meditation to heal their health condition. You ask them if it was worth it. They'll tell you, "My disease was my greatest teacher. I'm so blessed that I have it or had it, because now I'm a different person."
To make sure you're taking action after watching this video, I've created a free guide to help you build healthy habits. We can all make short-term change, but can those changes become a fundamental part of our life? Often they don't. And that's why in this free guide, I share with you the 6 crucial steps you need to take. They're really, really effective. If you want to get hold of that free guide right now, all you have to do is click the link in the description box below. Trauma, right?
there's a lot of awareness growing now about trauma, the impact of our childhoods, how we're spoken to, the beliefs we take on as kids, how that impacts us as adults. Now, one approach to deal with trauma is to go there, to go and unpick it and uncover it and see a therapist and detail what happened, why it happened, get an understanding of why you're behaving a certain way as an adult. Now, I think for many people, I include myself in this, that can be incredibly powerful and incredibly important. But I also see, when I think of your work, I wouldn't say it's mutually exclusive necessarily, from the outside at least, but is there a danger that we can spend too long in our trauma, processing our trauma, trying to think about it? Because effectively, a key message from your work is don't get stuck in those emotions of the past. Don't let your past define you. Think about that vision of the future. Start to feel what you want to feel in the future so you can experience it right now. But can someone go back, revisit their trauma, try and process it? Mm-hmm. And is that approach consistent with yours? Or would you say it's a better approach, or a different approach is to not spend time there, just create the new reality?
Yeah, I think I'm down the middle on this, okay? I think there are many modalities that work for trauma. What I've discovered is that insight never really changes behavior. You can see that your father was overbearing or was an alcoholic, or you could see all these different things, like you could come up with the insight of all these different things. The problem that I see with people is then they tend to excuse their change by saying, oh, I had a rough childhood, that's why I am the way I am. They're excusing their present position. So, and again, trauma is a difficult thing, but for me, the person who's living by the identity in their life that they were traumatized as a child or whatever it is, or they've had a trauma in their life, I'm not saying forget the trauma and create another emotion. I'm saying that the person who's willing to go through the emotion and keep working on lowering the volume to it. We have had so many people in this work with brutal pasts, really, really difficult pasts, do the work, and finally they reach that point where they just break free from the emotion. They look back, and I have interviewed enough of them. It's the same thing. They look back at their entire past, and they don't want to change one thing in their past because it brought them to this elegant moment where they're liberated. They see their betrayers, they see their abusers, they have nothing but love for them. Now, the side effect of that, and many times they'll say, it was like my heart blew wide open. They had to pass through the valley of the shadow of darkness to get there. And they just thought, I don't know if I can go any further. And they went one more time. And the body literally was liberated from the past, right? Because the trauma is not just in the brain. The trauma is stored emotionally in the body. So you want to take the body out of the past, out of the known. What do you think the body's going to say if it's been conditioned to be the mind? The unknown is a scary place. You step out into the unknown, you're going to be unprepared for that trauma. You don't know how it's going to happen. And so the person keeps clinging to the known. But when the person finally overcomes the emotion, the body literally is freed from the chains of the past. The side effect of that is seeing the past from a greater level of consciousness. Lo and behold, there goes the suicidal tendencies, there goes the dysfunction, there goes the irritable bowel syndrome. That was because the body was still living in that past event by living by the same emotion. So the research on memory is kind of fascinating, and I've studied it enough. The way we recount the past is not the way it happened, even if you absolutely think you remember it being that way. So we don't have the same brain as we did when we were 8 years old or 12 years old or 20 years old. We have a different brain. We have a completely different brain. So the fabrication of the story for many people, they embellish the story and make it seem even worse than what it was. But what you're saying is, I changed in those moments, And from a biological standpoint, I haven't been able to change since. So let me tell you why it's been so hard for me to change. And the story becomes dramatized or embellished. A person works them up, fire themselves into this emotional froth, and then fires and wires the same circuits in the brain, and they're actually reaffirming their limitation. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I think we're just taking too long, right? So 50% of that story isn't even the truth. It means, in a sense, we're reliving a miserable life that we never even had. And we don't want, but the unknown, people would rather cling to their suffering. This is not a judgment. We all do this. We'd rather stay in the known than take a chance in the unknown, because those emotions of survival are saying what? Run from the unknown. The unknown is a scary place. So now the unknown, you got to come up against that moment where you're going to actually leave that behind and step into the unknown. This is not a intellectual process. This is David and Goliath. There's a battle going on where the body keeps wanting to go back to its familiar state because it's subconsciously been conditioned to be the mind, stay in the known. So then, if the person keeps revisiting the trauma from the past, I'm not certain enough that when they revisit the trauma from the past, unless they learn how to desensitize their emotional response to it, that it's going to work for them. What I learned is that if the person overcomes the emotion, the memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom. And now you no longer belong to the past. So the body gets frustrated in the meditation. Instead of taking your blindfolds off or turning the lights on and say, listen to the voice, I can't meditate, this is too much. The sincere person says, what's on the other side of I can't? What's on the other side of this emotion? Let me see if I can settle my body back down out of that emotion and recondition it to a new mind. And the act of doing that in the beginning is very tedious. And all of a sudden, the person starts getting better at it. And they're telling their body it's no longer the mind, that they're the mind. They're executing a will that's greater than that program. And just like training an animal, you stay, you're not going to die, I'm going to feed you, you can check your emails, you can check your texts, but this is my time right now. And you keep doing that with the body, keep settling it down to the present moment. It acquiesces. It surrenders to a new mind. And when that happens, we've seen this, we've measured it, there's a liberation of energy. We go from particle to wave, we go from matter to energy. That emotion is liberated from the body. And now there's energy to heal. There's energy to create a new life. It's available energy. It's free energy.
Yeah.
So the person goes, wow, I see it from a different level of consciousness. I have nothing but love. Or, my goodness, I'm no longer that person. And they're now free from the past. Now, the side effect of that is that there's a biological upgrade. There's a neurological upgrade. There's a chemical upgrade. There's a genetic modification that's taking place. Why? You think the same way, you make the same choices, you do the same things, you create the same experiences, you feel the same emotions. Your biology will stay the same because you're the same. Now the person's thinking differently, they're making different choices, they're doing different things, they're behaving in different ways, they're having new experiences, and they're certainly feeling different emotions. The body reorganizes to a new chemistry. And they'll tell you, I'm not that person any longer. I'm literally not that person. And they're betrayers, even if they're family members, they have forgiveness for them. And what is forgiveness? You take your attention off the emotion. You overcome the emotion. You don't pay attention to the person or the problem. Now you're free. You free yourself and you free them. And
what if someone says to you, Dr. Joe, look, I get what you're saying, but my ex-husband cheated on me, right? They shouldn't have done it. I cannot forgive them for what they did. And the reason I'm asking is because this is exactly what happened with one of my patients. Because this often happens. So I talk a lot about forgiveness. And a lot of people push back. They go, yeah, I want to, but you don't know what happened to me. This was really, really bad. It's like, this cannot be forgiven. What would you say to that person?
I'd say to them, I want you to think about something in your life that you've done that you would like forgiveness for, that you don't feel good about. And forgive that person in the way that you would want to be forgiven. And you would be forgiven yourself. I mean, we've all had indiscretions. Nobody's perfect. So that person that is in that state is still in the emotional state. The problem with that is that no new information can enter the nervous system that is not equal to the emotion the person experiencing because it's not relevant. So the question really is how long do you want to do that? How long do you want to do that? And again, knowledge and information about what that is doing to that person's health and their biology. If you reason with them, we've had this happen enough times in our work. That's not an uncommon situation. When the person finally takes their attention off that and puts it on something else, they notice that they feel differently.
Yeah.
If they can, you can't just tell a person to forgive, because it's kind of an etherical thing. It's a subjective process, right?
Yeah.
So we've seen this. Our oxytocin levels in a lot of our participants go up 200 times, right? That's a lot of love. Oxytocin signals nitric oxide. Nitric oxide signals another chemical that literally causes the arteries in your heart and lungs to actually expand. There's more energy. There's more blood going into your heart. Okay. So when that person takes their attention off their ex, takes their attention off their past, and starts looking at themselves, denaturing that identity that's built on the past. See, that person had a reaction to that circumstance, and that reaction produces a refractory period of chemicals and emotions, right? And if you don't know how to control that refractory period, and it lasts for hours or days, it's called a mood. You keep that same refractory period going on for weeks or months, now it's a temperament, one long emotional reaction. You keep that refractory period going on for years on, and that's a personality trait. And most people's personalities are defined by, I am this way because my husband cheated on me. What you're really saying is, you haven't changed in 10 years, and you're giving your vital life force to that person. Who is worth 10 years of your life?
Yeah.
Who's worth it? So then, the stronger the emotion we feel, the more we pay attention to the cause. Where you place your attention is where you place your energy. That person's giving their vital life force to heal, their life force to change to that person or that circumstance. Lower the volume to that emotion.
Yeah.
You take your attention off that person or problem. It's not the person or the problem. They're using unconsciously that person or that circumstance to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. That's why they keep thinking about it. If they weren't addicted to that emotion, they would stop thinking about it. So then, is it the person? No, it's you're left. We'll take your ex-husband and put him in a rocket in a straitjacket. Let's shoot him to the moon. Now what? Now what? Now what are you going to do? You still have that embossed in your brain and conditioned in your body. At what point? So then the research on oxytocin, you can only talk around this. You can't say to someone, forgive, if they still feel the emotion. They're separate from the act of forgiving.
Yeah.
Imagine feeling so much love by no one's doing it to you. It's actually coming from within you. You have that moment, that catharsis, where you feel that emotion. Oxytocin levels go up just slightly in the research, just a little bit more elevated. An elevation in oxytocin makes it impossible to hold a grudge. They've done the research on the data. You cannot hold a grudge. It's impossible.
Yeah.
You just go, I like this feeling better than that feeling. And because I like this feeling better than that feeling, you're okay. Forget about it. I'm good. That person who falls in love again, whose husband cheated on them, who falls in love again and finds a person who is intelligent and caring and kind and loving and provides, all of a sudden they can forgive that person. Like, oh my God, that had to happen because now I have a better person in my life. Well, if you don't let go of that, you're never going to have this. In fact, if you bring that into the next relationship, you're not going to have a healthy relationship because there's going to be a trust issue on every level. So then you want an equal? Write down exactly what you want and become that person and see what comes to you. Try it out as an experiment. If I really work on, my God, this emotion is actually, now that I understand the science behind this emotion is actually weakening me every day. It's knocking my brain and body out of homeostasis. Stress is when our brain and body are knocked out of homeostasis and balance, turning on the stress response just by thought alone. Hormones of stress downregulate genes and create disease. My thoughts are making me sick. Is that person or that circumstance worth it? If my thoughts could make me sick, is it possible that my thoughts can make me well? Well, now you got to come up against the belief. No, I don't really want to believe this. Then that really means that you want to stay in that emotional state. But go see some testimonials of people who've had that and see the life that they're living now. The miracles, the synchronicities, the opportunities, the coincidences, the healings. They bless their past. They say, my disease, that condition, that was my greatest teacher.
Yeah.
That was my greatest teacher. And now the soul is free. Like, let's get on. In eternity, it's a big place. You got to hold on to that emotion for how long? You're not doing anything wrong. You're just taking too long. That's all.
Yeah.
And it works. It works with anything. With any, some people want wealth, some they were bankrupt, some people, their business partner, took all their money. Some people it's a relationship, some people it's trauma from childhood. It's all the same. But what we're looking for is wholeness. So then it's not just the emotion. The emotion is driving a certain behavior. The emotion is driving a certain habit of action. The emotion is driving a certain series of thoughts that are associated with that person or that circumstance. If you truly believe that you have the power within you to change, the first step would be saying, I have to take responsibility for myself right now because I got to start thinking differently. I got to start acting differently. I got to start feeling different. It's going to be hard.
Yeah.
If it was easy, everybody would be doing this. But how is self-love born? I've studied this. When the person sits through the fire and sits through all of that anxiety, all that hatred, all that anger, and keeps lowering the volume, sooner or later, the body's going to release it. And when it's released, forgiveness is the side effect. You take your attention off that person because you no longer have the emotion to keep your attention on. And in fact, you feel so good, this feels better that you naturally forgive. It's not like, now you're forgiven. It's not like, hey, look at me, I'm forgiving you. It's just kind of like, wow, isn't life great?
Yeah.
Whoa, you're good. I mean, you're good. I'm getting on with my life right now, right? So emotions keep us stuck in the past, and we tell that story, and we reaffirm it, we get in trouble.
It subjectively feels better to forgive and practice gratitude and joy. But biochemically, you change as well. This particular patient, when she did ultimately learn how to forgive, because her lifestyle, her diet was fantastic up to that point, but she had chronic high blood pressure. As soon as she started to learn how to forgive, blood pressure starts coming down.
Sure.
And you know this full well. Like subjectively feels great, but it is literally changing your physiology at the same time. And
let me just say one thing about that, because you could have the most organic, vegan, gluten-free, ketogenic, triple filtered water, take all your vitamins, take all your nutrients, work out, do Pilates, do yoga, do your breathing, you do all of that. Get your body chemically balanced, get your body physically balanced. But if you're not going to get your body emotionally balanced, forget it.
Yeah.
Because the moment you get emotional, your body literally goes to the past. That's the one that matters the most. And people, once they realize it's the emotion that's signaling the gene, oh my God, I better start really taking care of my emotional balance as much as I do with my physical exercise and my diet and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is, for many years I was focused on food and movement and sleep, and I still am.
I am too.
Those things are important, but I realize actually, if you want to get to the root of the root, it's up here.
Yeah.
It's how you think. It's how you deal with conflict. It's how you approach the world. It's also, Dr. Joe, what you said about awareness. Like the really powerful idea, one of the many powerful ideas I get from your work is it's about evolution, right? So if you've never meditated before, sure, start meditating. Learn how to meditate. Have a great meditation. Great. That's going to be better than if you weren't doing it. But then learn, oh, I had a great meditation, but I still was judging my coworker. I still reacted to my boss. Okay, cool. Tomorrow, I'm going to see if I can show up and not react in that way. So it's not, and again, we're talking about trauma. You're not saying don't go back and revisit it. You're just saying, hey, maybe don't stay there too long. Maybe if you've been trying to process it for 10 years and you're still there, maybe it's time to shift a little bit. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and look, we're human beings, we're so programmed for survival. And when you're in survival and you're threatened and there's a danger, you prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
So the person who's traumatized is actually anticipating the event to happen again. And they're preparing themselves for the worst case scenario because there's better chances of survival if you prepare for the worst. So the brain naturally fabricates an outcome, but it actually says, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And now we're this is a really vivid imagination, but it's working against us in a lot of ways. So there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, we've all done it. You've had a trauma, you've had an insult, you've had, a betrayal, you have whatever, and then you get wise from the experience, but then you're always, if it's really a strong trauma, then you're expecting it to happen again, right? So the brain is selecting out of the infinite potentials in the quantum field, the worst case scenario, and then emotionally embracing the outcome before it happens, a thought and a feeling, an image and an emotion, a stimulus and response, and they're conditioning their body into the mind of that emotion. They're reliving their past in their future every single day in the present moment. And now it becomes a very visceral and subconscious process. So it takes an enormous amount of will. It takes an enormous amount of awareness and energy to break that apart. And we have so many brain scans of people that have severe anxiety. And you cannot be anxious if you're in the present moment. And they just kept catching themselves, going to that thought and feeling that feeling and bringing it back. And then getting frustrated and going, ah. And then all of a sudden they're there again. Well, why are they there? Because they've been practicing that. You keep practicing feeling anxious, you get really good at it. You start practicing feeling gratitude, you get really good at that. We're doing a study with children in Australia, and I say to them, you practice being angry, you'll get good at being angry. You practice being kind, you get really good at being kind, and it feels better.
At its core, it's that simple.
It's that simple.
It really is. What you practice, you get good at.
Exactly.
One thing I've heard you say recently, which has been really helpful for me, is that you don't get up from your meditation until you've overcome that emotion, until you've reached that place of calm and gratitude and joy. And if I think back to when I started meditating on and off maybe 10 years ago, some days I'd drop in, it would be great. Other days it would be really hard. I think, oh, not today. So I'd walk out of it. I'd go, oh, not today. With a complete misunderstanding that, it always has to be perfect and joyful. Whereas now, I know it's a practice. I sit there for the entire time. Some days it's wonderful. Other days it's hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's very powerful, what you share there. How long do you really take for your morning routine?
So I allow for 2 hours.
2 hours.
And I would do the first 20 minutes or so, or 30 minutes, depends on me. I'm in my think box. And then the next hour and a half. If it takes me an hour, Rangan, to get to the present moment, I will not get up for my meditation until I get there. So I'm just uncompromising to that because I know that if I overcome myself, it's the overcoming process, that's the becoming process. So if I stretch myself past, it doesn't feel good, and I break through, then I'm a different person the rest of the day. If I get up and quit, then I'm the same guy. I can't expect anything really magical to happen in my life. So I'm just willing to just go that distance because I think that if you get up as the same person that sat down, nothing really happens. Nothing really happens. And we've talked to so many people that have had so many transcendental, profound experiences, and they look back at all the meditations that they've done, and it's not the good ones they remembered. It's the ones where they sat through the fire and they love themselves for doing it. They love themselves because they sat through it. That's really the value behind all of this. So for the person who's on the journey, like for me, I'm just the type of guy that, like, if I do a meditation and when I make it through it and it wasn't a pretty meditation, that discomfort bothers me the whole day. It bothers me because I don't want to do that again. And I want to make sure that I'm not thinking about the news, or I'm not thinking about what people think about me. I'm not thinking about all that, any of that stuff. I'm really thinking about what happened there, Joe. Like, where did you go? Like, why are you feeling this way? Because I'm disturbed by something, because I think I could do better. It's like he's like a martial artist, you're sparring somebody, you kicked in the face 3 or 4 times. Sooner or later you say, what am I doing? Like, what? And you sit there and you think about it over and over again, and it bothers you until you figure it out, right? And
you feel good because you overcame it. You're like, hey, man, I can overcome it.
And so then what people say to me, wow, 2 hours in the morning, I say, listen, it's really simple. If I can overcome myself, at the beginning of the day, the rest of my day, I can overcome anybody.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just okay with it. When you're okay with yourself, you're okay with anybody. When you're angry with yourself, you're angry with others. If you're unhappy with yourself, you punish other people that feel unhappy because you want them to feel the way you do. It's just the way it is. You get up grateful.
Yeah.
You get up grateful just for the fact that life is a gift. I'm alive. I got a body. I have a family. I have people that love me. I can eat. I have a home. Kind of running water in my shower. I feel pretty good. Yeah, I made a bunch of mistakes, but I'm alive.
Yeah.
Hey, a new day, new life. You get up grateful that way, and you start seeing these coincidences happening in your life. I guarantee you, the meditation will no longer be about a have to. That's what I love about our community. We don't do the work because we have to do the work or to please God or be holy or any of that stuff. People do the work because they don't want the magic to end. The moment you see the coincidence happen in your life, you're going to stop believing that you're the victim of your life, and you start believing you're the creator of your life. And when you do, what do you think that synchronicity creates? Do you think it creates sadness or pain? The synchronicity wakes you up. You feel a little energy. You feel a little joy, and that inspires you. Like, the experiment's kind of working.
Yeah.
I think I'll show up tomorrow for the experiment again. Hey, that's kind of weird. Hey, I'm going to do it again. Wow. And then you don't want to stop doing it because you start realizing that you actually can produce effects in your life.
Yeah.
I don't care what kind of past you've had. I don't care. You can't even tell me you're too sick to do this work. You can't tell me you're too old to do this work. You can't tell me I never meditated before to do this work. You can't even tell me that you had a brutal past, that you can't do this work. I've seen it happen. All races, all colors, all sizes, all shapes, all diets, all pasts, all social status. Nobody's so special to be excluded from this principle. And so the act of making time to be a creator in your life, if you make time to be a creator in your life, that means you must believe that you're a creator in your life. If you don't make time or you don't do it, you don't believe that you're the creator in your life.
Yeah.
You're believing in your past more than you're believing in your future. You show up to do the work because you want to believe in your future more than you believe in your past. And there's some people that do this work that get up and believe less in their past because they didn't overcome themselves. And then there's people who do it every day, and they get up and they believe more in their future every day. And the side effect of that are all these wonderful changes that begin to happen in a person's life. And they say what everybody says, I knew it was the truth. I just had to prove it to myself.
Dr. Joe, it's always so inspirational being around you. Just to finish off, for that person who's watching now and listening and says, hey, Doc, I understand what you're saying. I get it. But I don't have time. My life is busy. I don't have time to meditate. What would you say to them?
I would say you can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering, or you can learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration. I mean, if you don't have time now, make time when you can. But for the most part, I mean, I want to inspire people to not wait for that crisis or that trauma or that disease or that loss to really change. I want them to be inspired to try it out. It's an experiment. The hardest part about all of this, Rangan, is actually making the time to do it. That's the hardest part about all of this. When we make time for our precious selves, when we invest in ourselves, we invest in our future. And in order for us to believe in ourselves, we have to believe in possibility. And when we believe in possibility, we believe in ourselves. So It doesn't even have to be a long amount of time. Do a little experiment. Say, I'm not going to think these thoughts. I'll write them down. I'm not going to act this way or speak this way. And today I'm going to work on just staying conscious of these feelings. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to close my eyes for a few moments and remember that I'm not going to do these things. If that's the start, you just demystified meditation, because meditation means to become familiar with. To become familiar with, that symbol is familiarization. To become so familiar with yourself that you can become familiar with a new self and not default back to the old person. We all default. We all react. That's not the question. The question is, how long are you going to react? How long are you going to do that for? And so we have a choice. Try it out as an experiment. Little time, just a little time. If you don't have the time, when people say, well, I don't have the time, I say, well, get up earlier. And they say, well, I'm tired. And I say, well, go to bed earlier. What am I going to say? What is it? When is it going to, when do you want to do it? If you don't want to do it and you don't have the time, don't do it. If it inspires you to do it, I want you to do it. Only do it if you're inspired. Don't do it because you have to.
One of the exciting things that's happening right now is I'm coming to the realization that this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. And my interest is to take information that's based on science. And I think science is the contemporary language of mysticism. I think it's science that demystifies the mystical. And if you can apply and combine a little quantum physics with a little neuroscience, with a little neuroendocrinology, with a little psychoneuroimmunology, a little epigenetics and electromagnetism, and in a simple way, give people sound scientific information, the more they understand this model and understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, that the how becomes easier. So let's demystify just one simple process. If you believe at all that your thoughts have something to do with your life or something to do with your health, and the research points the finger that 90% of the thoughts that you think are the same thoughts as the day before. As long as you're thinking the same, more than likely your life or your health is going to stay the same, because the same thoughts lead to the same choices. The same choices lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors create the same experiences. And the same experiences produce the exact same emotions. And those same emotions influence our very same thoughts. And our biology, our neurocircuitry, our neurochemistry, our hormones, our gene expression stays the same because we're the same. And the principle is nothing changes in our life until we change. So then, the principle in neuroscience says that nerve cells that fire together wire together. If you keep thinking the same thoughts, making the same choices, doing the same things, reproducing the same experiences that stamp the same networks of neurons into the same patterns, all for the familiar feeling called you, in time we begin to hardwire our brain and condition our body emotionally to become more of a subconscious program. So 95% of who we are by the time we're in our mid-30s or middle life is a set of memorized behaviors, unconscious habits, automatic emotional responses, hardwired thoughts, beliefs, perceptions that function automatically. So if you believe in that idea, then if you wake up in the morning and you think about your problems and your brain is a record of the past, those problems are connected to certain people and certain objects and things at certain times of places. The moment you start thinking about your problems, really much you're remembering your past. And every one of those problems has an emotion associated with it. So the moment we feel unhappy, the moment we feel anxiety, the moment we feel unworthy, now our body's in the past. So thoughts become the language of the brain and feelings become the language of our body. And how we think and how we feel is our state of being. But it only takes a thought and a feeling, an image and an emotion, a stimulus and a response, and you're starting the conditioning process, and you're conditioning your body emotionally into the known, into the past. You do that enough times, the body's so objective that it doesn't know the difference between the real life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion that person's fabricating by thought alone. The body's believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Now, the research on epigenetics says that the environment signals the gene. Okay, well, the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion. So then the person is signaling the same genes in the same way because the body's believing it's living in the same environment. So the trauma, the betrayal, the loss, the drama, whatever it is, the diagnosis that causes a person to feel certain emotions, the majority of the emotions that we feel, and you know this because you're an expert on it and you write about it, are derived from the hormones of stress. And stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of homeostasis, right? So it makes sense then that when you perceive a threat or a danger in your life, you turn on that primitive nervous system and you're mobilizing all your body's resources for some threat, real or imagined. No problem if it's short term. But the chronic long-term effects of the hormones of stress downregulate genes and create disease. Now, the problem is we can turn on that stress response just by thought alone. We can think about our problems. We can imagine the worst-case scenario in our life. We can capture bitter memories and do that over and over and over again. And in effect, if we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and the science says that stress can push the genetic buttons that create disease, then our thoughts can make us sick. Well, the question is, if our thoughts can make us sick, is it possible then our thoughts can make us well? And that's kind of my interest.
So much to unpack there. There's a couple of statistics you mentioned there, that 90% of the thoughts we think are the same as the day before. I think you also said that 95% of who we are by the age of 35 are a set of memorized behaviors. And those two things really stood out to me because as a medical doctor, a lot of the things that I try and do with my patients is to help them make change in their life, let's say change their lifestyle. And a lot of the time, those behaviors that they engage in are very short-lived. They get super motivated, they do it for a few weeks, but then they often revert back to where they were before. And I'm wondering if those two statistics help me understand why that is, because actually, if we're not changing at source the programming in our brain in terms of how we think and how we approach the world, then it's going to be very hard, isn't it, to actually change those downstream behaviors in the long term?
Absolutely. And listen, you know this as well as anybody. I mean, chronic diseases require a lifestyle change. And change is an interesting concept. So the hardest part about change is not making the same choice as you did the day before. And the moment you decide to make a different choice, get ready, because you're going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. There's going to be some uncertainty. You're not going to be in the known. You're stepping out into the unknown. You're doing something differently. And the body, which has been conditioned to be the mind, the servant is now the master. So the body loves the familiar known. It loves the same suffering. It loves the same pain. It loves the same unworthiness. It's been conditioned that way for years on end. It really is running the show. So the moment you step out into the unknown, the body goes, wait a second, I'd rather feel guilty than this feeling of the unknown because I can't predict my future. So the body starts influencing the mind, and we start to hear this chatter in our head that says, I can start tomorrow. Tomorrow's a better day. You really don't feel like it today. Why don't you just have one piece of cake? You're a loser. It's your parents' fault. It's your ex's fault. It's your culture's fault, whatever it is. And if we accept, believe, and surrender to that thought as if it's the truth, that's an old circuit in the brain. That thought will lead to the same choice, which will lead to the same behavior, which will create the same experience, which will produce the same feeling or emotion. The person says, well, this feels right to me. No, that feels familiar. Crossing the river of change, going from the old self to the new self, there is a neurological, a biological, a hormonal, a genetic death of the old self. There's pruning going on. There's inhibition going on. We're no longer releasing the same stress hormones that give us the arousal. And so if there's three types of stress, physical, chemical, and emotional. Physical stress being trauma, injuries, accidents, falls. Chemical stress, viruses, bacteria, pesticides, pollutants, toxins, hangovers, whatever. Emotional stress, that's the big one. That's family tragedies, second mortgages, single parenting, 401ks, whatever it is. It tends to be then that the difficult one to manage really is our emotional stress. So if you can help people to get more physically balanced, more chemically balanced, and to become more emotionally balanced, then the effects of their personal change will be expedited.
Yeah.
And there'll be a longer duration. So the person sees you for 6 months, they start a great program, they start making the right choices, and they start feeling better. And then once they make the wrong choice, then it's a downward spiral back to the old unconscious habits and emotional condition. They feel unworthy again. And they return back to your clinic, or they return back to your consultation, and they come back with the same exact conditions. And the simple solution is, because you return back to the same personality, and you're feeling the same emotions, and your body's back to believing it's in the same environmental condition. So if your personality creates your personal reality, and I believe that, and your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel, then the present personality who's listening to this podcast has created the present personal reality called their life. Not your ex, not your parents, not your boss. You create your life. So it makes sense then, if you wanted to create a new personal reality, you'd have to change your personality. In other words, if you want to change your life, you have to change. And nothing changes in your life until you change. So then this first step in change then, 95% of who we are is a set of unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. Then the first step is to become conscious of your unconscious thoughts, to become so aware of how you behave. Do you complain? Do you blame? Do you make excuses? Do you judge? Are you aggressive? And then look at the emotions. What is this emotion I'm feeling? Wow, this is guilt. This is sadness. This is victimization. This is unhappiness. Name it. So now you're so conscious of it that you don't go unconscious and return back to the same self. And how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's the moment of change.
Yeah. I mean, it's so powerful. There's two key elements there that I'd love to dive into a little bit. There's awareness and personality. On personality, one of the deep realizations in my own life over the past few years has been that our personalities, much of our personality at least, is not fixed. Like, many people think that, the way I am is the way I am. And what I've learned through the research, but also through my own personal experience of life, is that often our personality is not who we are, it's who we had to become. So, for example, for most of my life, most of my friends and family would say that I'm intensely competitive. I can't stand to lose. I will win. I will do what I need to do to win at all costs. But I know full well that now comes from a feeling of lack. That came from a feeling of lack inside, that I developed this idea as a child that actually I'm only loved, I'm only worthy when I get full marks or when I'm a success, right? So therefore, of course, being competitive absolutely serves that purpose, because if you're competitive, you're going to keep reinforcing that, you're going to then succeed and you're going to get that external validation which you feel you need. But as I've become aware of that, and that's where the awareness piece I think comes in, for me, I've become acutely aware that actually, no, I can change that. Actually, that's not fixed for life. And these days, I'm not competitive. I'm competitive in a different way. Like, it's not because I need to succeed because that says who I am and that's a reflection of who I am. It's because, no, I'm no longer coming from a place of lack. I'm coming from a place of love now where, I still want to do well, but it's not a reflection of my self-worth. So I've really experienced that you can change.
Right. Well, then the fundamental thing then is to realize then that there's great science to show that we are not hardwired to be a certain way for the rest of our lives, and we're not doomed by our genes, that we're marvels of adaptability and change. Now, here's the challenge, though. The challenge is that most people wait for crisis or diagnosis before they make up their mind to change. And my message is, why wait? So then if your personality creates your personal reality and you become conscious that in lack or in separation, the game to play when you're living in three-dimensional reality is that you have to do something to get what you want. So then you have the thought of wanting something, right? You want a new career, you want to succeed in something, you want a new relationship, you want to heal. That thought of whatever that experience is, your mind actually predicts it somewhere in the future. And you say, if I work really hard, if I sacrifice a certain number of things, if I save a lot of money, I can go on this vacation or have this experience. And some people wait for the experience to occur. And when the experience occurs, the payoff is the emotion in three-dimensional reality. But the distance between the thought of what you want and the experience of having it, between cause and effect, between one point of consciousness, I'm conscious that I'm competitive, and another point of consciousness, can I change that, is called time. So everything in three-dimensional reality takes time, and we experience separation until the event happens, and then we feel the emotion. Well, that's great. But the fundamental quality of a person's personality who's competitive, once they have that experience, then they're going to compete for the next thing they want. And there's nothing wrong with that, because when we're matter trying to change matter, of course, we're going to use the principles. We're going to control, we're going to predict, we're going to compete, we're going to fight for, we're going to work harder, we're going to manipulate, we're going to do anything we can to produce an outcome. And when we have the experience then produces the emotion. Well, the question is then people become so reliant on the experience to change their emotional state. They need something outside of them to change their internal state. And so if I said to somebody, hey, why are you so unhappy today? They would say, I'm unhappy because of that person or that circumstance. Yeah. And what that really means is that person or that circumstance is actually controlling the way you feel and the way you think. And anything that controls the way we feel and the way we think, we're victims to that circumstance. In other words, we're victims to our environment, and our response to the environment actually weakens the organism. It actually takes the body's vital life force and turns it into emergency. And you tap those resources. Okay. So then that's cause and effect. You're waiting for something, you create something, and we're in the plane of doing, and you master some skills, you get educated, you make the right choices, you get the right counseling or the right advice, and you could actually succeed in this world. Well, that's great, but the time between you getting it and the thought of it is a lot of separation, right? And so what if, like you said, okay, what would a new personality who's not competitive live like? How would I have to think? How would a person who's no longer competitive have to think? And you start thinking about how to think. And the act of actually with intention or attention actually begins to install new circuitry in your brain, new hardware. Keep doing it, and it becomes like a software program. That becomes the new voice in your head that says, ease up, there's another way to do it. Then if you said, how am I going to be in my life when I open my eyes? How am I going to live today, one day, one lifetime, as if I wasn't competitive? Okay, well, I may have to read a little bit and learn a little about how to do that, but I can find somebody that did that. Obviously, someone has. If you closed your eyes and you rehearsed mentally how you're going to be on a Zoom call, how are you going to be with your colleagues, how are you going to be in your relationships, mental rehearsal, when you're truly present, the brain does not know the difference between the real life experience and what you're imagining. And the research on mental rehearsal says you can install neurological hardware in your brain to look like you've already done it. That's already been experienced. Now your brain is no longer a record of the past. Now it's a map to the future. Keep priming the brain with those instructions, and the hardware will become a software program. Now you'll start behaving that way. Now here's the hard part, which you accomplished. Can I teach my body emotionally what it would feel like to no longer be competitive, to be in love with life and know that everything's going to work out, or that I'm resourceful or intelligent or whatever it is? Can I bring up the feeling of what the competitive, non-competitive person, or a person who's mastered that feels like? If you can teach your body emotionally what that feels like before the experience, then it would make sense then, if you could do that enough times, you can condition your body emotionally to begin to change with that thought and that feeling, with that image and that emotion. And so then the person becomes a new personality and changes from the old personality. And our research shows when you do that, not only do you change your circuitry, the way your brain works, the way your heart works, your gene expression, your immune system, but the side effect of that a lot of times is there's very profound biological changes that take place in the person's health. And you say, how did you do that? And they'll tell you, that disease exists in the old personality. I'm literally somebody else. So if you have evidence and testimony, which we do have, that it's possible to change, and we have great evidence in scientific research that we're doing, evidence becomes the loudest voice. And that person who stands on the stage and tells the story of their personal transformation, and they're speaking the truth, they're the 4-minute mile. And that's a new level of consciousness that says, I don't need anything outside of me to change my internal state. I could actually self-regulate and change my internal state. And the more I understand what I'm doing based on the model of science and why I'm doing it, made simply, then the how gets easier because you assign meaning to it. And when you assign meaning to it, you switch on that prefrontal cortex and it will find value in the act. If you don't know what you're doing and why you're doing it, it's left to conjecture, to superstition, to dogma. And so then lighting a match in a dark place and taking a look at what aspect of yourself, if you want to be happy, then the first thing you have to do is stop being unhappy. You got to become conscious of those thoughts that make you feel bad and the memories that go along with it and the emotions of that. And disentangling from that program takes a lot of energy and a lot of awareness.
You mentioned visualization there, really, this theme of creating the emotion and the feeling now. You're not waiting for something to happen in the future so you can experience that feeling. You're actually taking control of that and creating that feeling immediately, which is very powerful. And what I think of when you say that is I think about sports people. Tiger Woods, for example, the night before playing 18 holes, he'd be in bed and he would literally be playing every single hole, every shot, picturing where it's going to land, walks up, plays that shot. Is it going to be a little draw? It's going to be a little cut. Is it going to be low? Is it going to be high? To the point where he and other golfers will say, when they show up to actually play, they've already played the course. So I know a mutual friend of ours, David Hamilton, when I spoke to him on the show a couple of years ago, David spoke about tennis for him and how, never really played before. And I think within a few months or within a year, he was actually doing really well in the men's leagues through this kind of process of visualization. So I think when we hear about it from sports folk, we get it. We go, yeah, it's important for them. But many of us don't think about it with our own health. We think that the way we feel is the way we feel. Oh, I happen to feel low and sad. The other thing that I discovered whilst I was researching for this conversation, Dr. Joe, was there's this wonderful TED talk by a chap called Anil Seth. He's a global researcher in consciousness at the University of Sussex. And in his TED talk, he shows this wonderful image of a human being. Literally, there's a false hand in front of them. And he's looking at that false hand. And then after a few seconds, someone drops a knife in on the false hand and he pulls his real hand away. It's so profound. And this really speaks to what you've just been saying, which is your brain doesn't know the difference.
Yeah, we don't see things how they are. We see things how we are. And so I don't like to use the word visualization because I think it's been overused. I like to use the word mental rehearsal. I don't care if you're a virtuoso musician. I don't care if you are a performer or an actor. I don't care if you're a dancer or an athlete. Everybody does this who's engaged in getting better at whatever they do. They will rehearse the course. Now, or they'll rehearse the act enough times that once they can concept the whole thing to its completion, and they get out of that think box, then the think box is so important because we have to review our act. We have to repeat it enough times. And the act of mental rehearsal really installs the neurological hardware in your brain. It primes the brain so you have circuits to use. Now, mental rehearsal also changes the body. You can take a group of men and have them imagine or rehearse doing bicep curls for an hour a day for 2 weeks and add an emotional component called stronger, harder, more intense. And for 1 hour, they practice in their mind doing those curls. At the end of 2 weeks, there's a 13.5 increase in muscle strength. They never lifted a weight. Their body's changing by thought alone. So the person who's priming their brain and body through rehearsal, when they get in their play box, there's no thinking. They're just doing. There's just the act. In fact, the thought of what they're doing becomes the experience. They get lost in the act, and their analytical facilities, their analytical mind is out of the way, and they can sustain a state where nothing in their environment is going to move them from this state. They're in the feeling of what it would feel like to play well, and they hold on to that feeling. And when the conditions get tense, they actually do something different. They self-regulate, and they actually crave this moment of performance to be able to produce an outcome. And so there's no mysticism to this. It's just what people do when they get really into something is that we rehearse all the time. So but people understand if you take a group of people that never played the piano before and you teach them one-handed scales and chords and they come and practice for 2 hours a day for 5 days, at the end of 5 days, if you do a brain scan before and after, they'll grow circuits on the opposite side of the brain. No magic there. You learn something new. Learning's making new connections. You get your body involved. You get some instruction. You have an experience. Experience enriches the circuits. Repeat it over and over again. Fire and wire and pay attention and stay present. You'll assemble new neurological circuitry. Take another group of people, have them close their eyes, and actually have them mentally rehearse playing the scales and chords for 2 hours a day for 5 days. Scan their brain before and after, and at the end of 5 days, their brain will look like they've been playing the piano for 5 days, but they never lifted a finger. The brain literally changed through the rehearsal. Okay, so now take the person and put them in front of a piano. They've never played the piano before. And they could actually play those scales and chords like the people who are actually physically demonstrating it. So what does that have to do for the single mother of 3 children? What does that have to do with the person who's trying to heal a health condition? It's not enough to just have a good meditation and get up and spend the rest of your day reacting and responding to the conditions in your life. That's 1 hour of living or conditioning your body and brain into the future against 15 hours of you responding emotionally from your past. So we got to rehearse, okay, how am I going to be in this situation? How am I going to change? What would love do today? What would greatness look like? It's those frontal lobe questions that actually begins to install the circuitry, and we all do it naturally. The only time we don't do it is when we're living in stress and we're living in survival. Why? Because it's not a time to create. It's not a time to learn. It's not a time to go inward. It's not a time to dream. It's a time to run, fight, and hide. And if you're spending the majority of your time in the arousal of those stress hormones, then most people their senses become heightened, they narrow their focus, and now they're engaged in doing anything they can, relying on something outside of them to take away that feeling. So if people begin to understand that they actually can change, and they understand a formula to do it, and they practice that formula, and they rehearse it, both by mentally rehearsing it and actually participating in it, the effects should be in the experiment that something should change either in your body or in your life, and that's why we do it. So when you see the changes or the synchronicities or the coincidences or the opportunities starting to show up in your life, you're going to pay attention to what you did and you're going to do it again. And many people who have chronic health conditions that just get beyond those thoughts and those habits and those emotions that keep them as that same personality and begin to think, act, and feel differently, notice dramatic changes in their health and in their biology. And we have the data to suggest that people who do this for 7 days, their body looks like genetically and biologically they're in a different life. Their body is no longer responding in the same way, and they're no longer victims to their environment because they can self-regulate. There tends to be a greater resistance to anything in their environment, even on a microscopic level.
What's your view on addiction? What's driving so much addiction? And what can people do to try and break free?
Sure. I think it's a question worthy of a conversation. I think that we've been programmed, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just how we've been programmed. So I think behind every substance addiction or some addiction on some gaming or media or whatever, there's an emotion that the person is doing their best to regulate. So let's just say a person has been exposed to a trauma, right? And when we have an event in our life that changes our emotional state, the stronger the emotion we feel from the shock, the betrayal, the trauma, the news, whatever it is, the more altered we are inside of us, the more the brain freezes a frame and takes a snapshot, and that's called the long-term memory. And long-term memories, so we remember them because we can remember the feeling associated with them. So what most people don't know is that trauma or those series of events alters our internal state, and every time we think about or remember the trauma, we produce the same chemistry in the brain and body as if the event was occurring. Now, the body is so objective that it doesn't know the difference between the real-life experience that's creating that emotion or the emotion that person is fabricating by thought alone. And it only takes a thought and a feeling, an image and emotion, a stimulus and response, and you're actually conditioning the body subconsciously into that emotional state. And that sets the baseline of that person's emotional state. So then the person goes, God, I feel empty, I feel anxious, I feel unworthy, I feel resentment, I feel frustrated, and I don't know how to change it. So then they look for things in their outer world to make that feeling go away. So whether it's a drug, whether it's gaming, whether it's pornography, whether it's complaining, doesn't matter what it is. But let's just use a pill as an example, or a drug, a recreational drug. The person takes a recreational drug. The moment they take the recreational drug, they notice a change in their emotional state. And the moment they notice that change in their emotional state, they associate that change with what caused it, and they remember what caused it. So that starts to create a dependency. Now, I think there are degrees of addiction. Some are very physiological, receptors are modified. But when you get right down to it, an addiction is when the body has been conditioned to be the mind. So then the person, every time they start feeling the emptiness, they feel the unworthiness, they feel the frustration, they feel the anxiety, their brain creates the image of what they need to do to make that feeling go away. And the last time, or the last series of times, it was that exogenous substance or that activity that made it go away. Now, here's the problem. Let's use gaming as an example, okay? So when you blow someone up, or you break through a certain level, or you shoot someone, or you get points for whatever you're doing in a game, there's a release of dopamine in the brain, and dopamine is the reward chemical. It's the pleasure chemical. The problem is that the amount of dopamine that's released in a very short interval of time is outside of normal. So now, rush dopamine into the brain, and the receptor sites on the outside of the cell say, this is way too much dopamine than I'm used to processing. So the receptor sites actually close down. They shut down. So now, in order for the person to get that same feeling, they got to play more.
Yeah.
They got to do more. The stimulus has got to be greater. So over time, we start recalibrating those pleasure centers, those receptors, to a higher level. Now, what's the significance of that? In the absence of that stimulation, our pleasure centers have been hijacked to such a high level that we can't find pleasure in anything. You can't find pleasure from a sunset. You can't find pleasure from sitting down at the table and having a meal with your family, playing with a dog, going to see your grandparents. Especially for a lot of children, you can look at them and you can see that something happened to them where they're just glazed over. That's because they're kidnapped by the technology. And so in order for them to get that same rush, they have to play more, they have to do more. Now, here's really the big problem. Learning should be a reward in and of itself, right? I mean, learning should be a reward. But now, for most people, they need a stimulus. They need something to drive their attention to whatever they're learning. And now attention is dependent on something outside of us. And when you capture people's attention, you capture their energy. So, and you can program them as a result of it. So the solution then is to teach people how to self-regulate. So we see people that come to our work that have had problems with addictions, all kinds of addictions. But really, it's some emotional addiction that really they're trying to change, right? And so they just been programmed to think that it has to happen outside of us. So what we discovered in our research is that you could actually turn that hypnosis, that conditioning around, and not wait for the experience to produce the emotion, but teach people how to self-regulate their emotional states and be able to trade resentment, frustration, anxiety for an elevated emotion. And if you keep practicing it, you get really good at what you practice.
Yeah.
So good at it that you actually become it. So then when people start to self-regulate, we actually measure what happens to their physiology when they do it properly. And it becomes a habit. And so then when the person notices then that their body's out of balance, they have one of two choices. They can rely on some exogenous substance or something outside of them, or they can take a moment and recalibrate their emotional state. And the only challenge, I think, with addictions is that the moment you say, I'm not going to drink coffee, I'm not going to smoke cigarettes, I'm not going to drink alcohol, I'm not going to have sugar, the moment you make that conscious declaration with your conscious mind, the body has been conditioned and dependent on that substance. So 2 hours goes by and the body has modified its receptor sites and it starts talking to the brain. It starts saying, Rangan, why don't you start tomorrow? Tomorrow's a better day. Any other day but this day, this is not a good day for you. It's my parents' fault. It's my boss. It's the news. And that thought is being driven by the body-mind. Now, if we act on that thought, we make it the same choice, we do the same thing, we create the same experience, we feel the same emotion, and then all of a sudden that emptiness or that emotional state goes away, and the person returns back to the known. So there is a biological, there is a neurological, there's a chemical, there's a hormonal genetic death of the old self because you're breaking that stimulus and response. That inhibition then causes the body to feel chaos. It's looking for the known, the familiar. So instead of white knuckling it to the other side, we teach people how to regulate their internal emotional states. And over time, you start seeing the moment you're feeling an elevated emotion like gratitude or appreciation or kindness or care or in love with life, you don't need anything outside of you to make you feel better. You're actually doing it by yourself. And people can sustain these states like any habit for an extended period of time.
Yeah, there's a phrase I've heard you say before, Dr. Joe, that people often mistake love for pleasure. And when people start to feel whole again, they have less of a need for pleasure.
Yeah.
And I think that really speaks to what you've just said. You know, when you feel these, as you call them, elevated emotions, you have less of a need for these quick dopamine fixes, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, think about it. I mean, how could you want, if you're whole, if you're whole, there's no need to want, there's no lack, there's no separation.
What does that mean, whole?
Well, here's how we describe it. We do a lot of studies on brain coherence and heart coherence. And let's talk about what it's not, okay? I mean, so when there's an emergency or when we're aroused by some threat or some condition in our life, or we can't predict an outcome, we can't control an outcome, we have the perception that something in our world could possibly get worse, we switch on that primitive nervous system, right? That fight or flight nervous system, and now the game is fight, run, or hide. The problem is with human beings, when we're at it, we feel like a loss of control. Our brain all of a sudden tries to control everything in our life. So every person, every object, everything, every place, every experience that you've ever had is mapped in your neocortex. So the arousal of the stress hormones drives the brain into a very high brainwave state called high beta. But then as you shift your attention from one meeting to another text to another person to another thing to another place you have to go, every one of those different elements has a neurological network in the brain. So like a lightning storm in the clouds, the brain starts firing out of order. It starts firing incoherently. And when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. And so think about when you're stressed. The most common thing that people do is they over-focus. They narrow their focus on whatever it is that's driving them to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
And so then the act of paying attention to the problem is actually driving the brain further out of balance. And we've studied this. When you analyze that problem, that circumstance, that condition within the emotion that you are feeling and derived by the hormones of stress, you'll make your brain worse 100% of the time because the analysis, the over-analysis is driving it further into a higher thinking, higher beta brainwave state. So this kind of narrow focus is what causes the brain to be a house divided against itself. So we thought, well, why don't we do the opposite? Why, instead of narrowing our focus on the cause, something physical, something material, because the hormones of stress actually heighten the senses and cause us to become materialists. So matter is the issue when there's survival. It's whatever's around the corner. It's whatever's going to happen. So we said, okay, let's teach people something else. Let's teach them how to broaden their focus. And as they broaden their focus and take their attention off of everything material and everything known and focus on space, focus on nothing, the act of doing that actually starts slowing down the analytical mind. You can't analyze when you're sensing. And it starts to change the person's brainwaves into a slower brainwave pattern.
Right.
And so now as you start slowing your brainwaves from that high beta, you start slowing down, you're shifting gears, you go into a mid-range beta, then you go into a low-level beta, and then all of a sudden you get into alpha. Now alpha, when you're in alpha, the voice in your head, the critic in your mind goes away. That voice that's talking to you stops, and the brain tends to see in images, in pictures. That's the imaginary state, that's the creative state. And in alpha, when you're out of survival, you're looking for answers, you're creative, you're looking for new ways of doing things. So when they broaden their focus, not only do they move into alpha, but all of a sudden we start seeing those different compartments of the brain that were once subdivided, all of a sudden starting to unify. Different communities of neurons that were fragmented start to synchronize.
And that's what you call coherence.
Right, so what syncs in the brain, links in the brain. So when you see the front of the brain talking to the back of the brain, the right side of the brain talking to the left side of the brain, you start knowing something good is starting to happen and the person's starting to create more order. So when you see those psychic union of two hemispheres coming together, you know, the polarity, that person starts to feel incredibly whole. And coherence, when you have waves that are coherent, when they build or interfere with each other, their waves get bigger. And the higher the amplitude of the wave, the higher the energy in the brain. All of a sudden, the person starts to become very relaxed and no longer stressed in a program, and kind of alert and awake. At the same time, when you're resentful or frustrated or impatient and you're sitting in traffic, the same hormones are released and your heart is actually beating like there's a tiger behind you, but you can't run, you can't fight, you can't hide, and the traffic is frustrating you even more, you're releasing more of those chemicals, so the heart starts beating against the closed system. And when that happens, the heart starts beating out of order. Now, the heart's incoherent. So when incoherent waves interfere with each other, they're out of order, they diminish energy, and the brain energy leaves the heart. And this is when we stop trusting. This is not a time to communicate. This is not a time to learn. This is not a time to be creative. And energy leaves the heart. So we discovered then when a person truly starts practicing those elevated emotions, the heart gets very orderly, very coherent as well. And now, when you start feeling the emotions of the things that you want in your life or that you would like to create in your life, ahead of the actual experience, it's impossible for you to want it. Why could you possibly want it if you feel like it's already happened? Now, here's the cool part. Maintain that modified state of being. Get so good at doing it with your eyes closed. Start practicing with your eyes open. And if you can maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day, coherent heart, soon as energy reaches the heart, we've done thousands of studies on this, it's going straight to the brain. The heart starts to inform the brain that it's safe to create. At the exact same time, the heart begins to produce an external magnetic field. You've got a Wi-Fi signal now. You start feeling connected. You start feeling more whole. The brain is coherent. It's directing a very clear vision of what it wants. Combine that clear intention with an elevated emotion, you have a different Wi-Fi signal. You have a different energy. And now the cool part about that is you start to see those synchronicities, those coincidences, those opportunities start showing up in your life, and you're not going anywhere to get them. They're actually coming to you. Now let's just look at the biology of this.
Yeah.
Epigenetics says it's the environment that signals the gene. Genes don't create disease. Our response to the environment actually creates disease. Well, the end product of an experience in the environment is called an emotion. So the person who lives by the same emotion every single day, The body's so objective, it's believing it's living in the same environment, doesn't know the difference. And they keep the same genes signaled in the same way. Genes make proteins. Proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body. The expression of proteins is the expression of life. And the person now is in the same emotional state. They're expressing the same genes, and nothing changes in our life until we change.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the person who trades resentment and frustration and anger and everything else for an elevated emotion, and they can sustain that state, the body's so objective that it's believing it's living in a different environment.
Yeah.
So they're knocking on the genetic door. So the elevated emotion the person memorizes, the body is so objective it doesn't know the difference between the real life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion that that person's regulating by thought alone. Keep knocking on the genetic door. You down-regulate the gene for disease and you up-regulate the gene for health, because their body's in a different emotional state and the body's believing it's living in a different environment. And we've done studies with novice meditators, and we were curious to see what kind of biological changes would take place in 1 week if you went all in, like immersed yourself in the entire week-long event.
Like people do on their 1 week
Yeah,
retreats.
on our 1 week retreats. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we draw blood and we look at about 2,882 metabolites, all exosomes, gene expression, and at the end of 7 days, the novice meditators, almost 100% of them, show substantial biological changes in their blood that suggests that they're living in a different environment. Now, here's the weird part about it. They're in a ballroom. There's nothing going on in a ballroom. I've been to thousands of ballrooms. There's nothing very exciting going on in a ballroom. They're actually making those changes inwardly. And I say to our research team, where are those chemicals coming from? Where are they coming from? The person's not taking any substance. It's coming from within us. And so the nervous system starts manufacturing a whole pharmacy of chemicals equal to the person's intention and emotional state. And it's how we think and how we feel that begins to alter things in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely incredible to hear this. What kind of metabolites or I guess chemicals are you measuring? Are they to do with markers of inflammation?
Yes. Cytokines, markers of inflammation.
Markers of the immune system?
Markers of the immune system, exosomes that have very positive effects that show the cell is in a state of growth and repair instead of in a state of tissue breakdown or catabolism.
I mean, this is profound because a lot of people may not realize that just the way you sleep, if you have a beautiful 7.5, 8 hours of deep sleep compared to, let's say, 5 hours of sleep, the next day you can measure maybe 700 genes are expressed differently in the body. You can be more pro-inflammatory the night after poor sleep. And what you're saying, your research is showing that actually when you take novice meditators, people who don't know how to do this, who don't have years of experience, they're not monks, they've not been trained.
In fact, not to interrupt you, in fact, if they have no experience, they're going to do really well because they're going to do exactly what you tell them to do, especially guys that come and their wives drag them along, or people come and their partner wants them to do it, and they're like, I don't know anything about this. And I say, you're the perfect person. Just follow the instructions.
Because you have no preconceived notion to undo.
They just do exactly what you ask them. There's the guy, his heart's blown wide open, he's crying, he's hugging his wife, and she's looking at me like, what happened to him? He just fell into something really big. So yes, of course.
Is that common in terms of the people who come to your work? I'm interested as the difference between males and females. And something you said there really resonated with me. So in my clinic, what I've seen time and time again is that men, and they're well known for this, and of course this is a gross generalization, but I've certainly seen it to be true in my own experience, is they wait. They've got things going on. They don't want to see the doctor. They don't want to go and get help. And often when they turn up, the first thing they will say is, hey, doc, look, I'm sorry to bother you. My wife made the appointment for me. My girlfriend told me I have to come in and see you. It's almost as if they want to excuse themselves for, hey, I wouldn't be here wasting your time, but actually, my other half made me do this.
Sure.
Is that something you see as well in your work?
Something similar, but in terms of this kind of genre, we have a very high percentage of men
Great.
that come to our work And I think the number one reason why, Angan, is because we use science as the model. We rationalize. We combine quantum physics with neuroscience, with neuroendocrinology, with psychoneuroimmunology, the mind-body connection, epigenetics, electromagnetism. We build a model. So guys they like to understand all of that stuff so they can reason with it so they can leap. Women somehow tend to be a lot more intuitive.
Yeah.
It resonates with them. They trust that, and they just seem to flow a little differently. But then again, we have men that come, and of course, a lot of times their partner wants them to come, but they really come because they notice the change in their partner. They're like, wow, they're way different. I can see that their response to things is completely different. In other words, my memory of them, this person is not fitting into how I remember them. They're out of phase, So then when men finally do commit and they understand the science, and gosh, I mean, it's a really big thing for a man to get in touch with those feelings, right? Because in the game of competition, the rut, the roost, you're always trying to compete. You're always trying to get ahead. You're always can't be vulnerable. Well, that works for a really a good amount of time when you are matter trying to change matter, when you got to do things and you got to work hard and you got to be driven and all that stuff, sacrifices. But we teach that there's another way to create, actually, and that is really that opportunity for them to open their hearts. Now, I have stood next to men that have done it and completely reversed a health condition within a very short amount of time because here comes the house of cards. They just realize that they've been holding this facade, this image of themselves, just so that they can keep up and play the game. And instead of waiting for crisis or disease or diagnosis, and once they get in touch with their feelings again, there's nothing like a man who's leading with his heart. Oh my God, they consider the whole. And then you take a look at women, and this is just, again, a general observation. Women hold the family together. They make a whole lot of sacrifices. They continue to forgive. They do a lot of things. They put themselves after they've taken care of their family. And all of a sudden, they already know how to love. You just teach them how to get very clear on their intention. And watch out. I mean, women do amazing work.
If that conversation resonated with you, here is another incredibly powerful one that I really think you're going to enjoy.
Addiction is the most human thing there is. All addictions, they're attempts to gain pain relief, emotional pain relief for something or another. Then this whole society is so expert at selling us stuff to fill those holes temporarily. This is the whole ethic of this culture.